The weak don't survive winter in the Silver Pine Mountains. That's what Helga McBride told her stepdaughter Rosemary Love every single day. But Rosemary would learn that weakness isn't measured by wolf rank or bloodline strength. Sometimes the ones called weak are the only ones strong enough to save those who once rejected them. Tonight, 7 wolves would freeze to death outside her cabin door. And the Omega they'd spent years tormenting would have to choose. Let them die, or prove she was never weak at all. Chapter 1. The Omega's Burden. The first thing anyone noticed about Rosemary Love was that she didn't belong. Not in the Silver Pine Pack, not in her stepmother's Grand Lodge with its cathedral ceilings and imported marble, certainly not in the family that shared her last name, but never her blood. Rosemary? You're tracking mud again. Helga McBride's voice carried from the kitchen, sharp as the winter wind howling outside. Must you always be so thoughtless? Rosemary looked down at her boots. They were clean. They were always clean because she checked 3 times before entering the house. But Helga saw dirt, whether it existed or not. I'm sorry, Mother. The word tasted like ash. Mother. Helga had married Rosemary's father 6 years ago, 2 years after Rosemary's real mother died during a rogue attack. Her father followed his mate to the grave within a year, leaving Rosemary alone with a woman who looked at her the way most people looked at spoiled meat. Don't call me that. Helga emerged from the kitchen, her blonde hair perfect despite the early hour, her silk robe spotless. Everything about Helga McBride was spotless, polished, powerful. She was a beta wolf from a prestigious family, and she never let anyone forget it. You may address me as Helga. I've earned my name. You've earned nothing. Behind Helga, her biological daughter, Tanya Moore, smirked over her coffee cup. Tanya had inherited her mother's looks and her father's alpha bloodline from her first marriage. Where Rosemary was small and plain with mousy brown hair, Tanya gleamed like a jewel. Golden-haired, tall, perfect. The pack's future Luna, destined to mate with Alpha Ricky Mason himself. She can't help being defective, Tanya said, examining her manicured nails. Omega blood is Omega blood. Even if Father was foolish enough to claim her as pack, she'll never be one of us. Rosemary's wolf whimpered inside her chest. Omega, the lowest rank, the weakest link. In a world where strength determined worth, she had none. Her wolf was small, her scent barely registerable, her presence so forgettable that pack members often walked past her without acknowledgement. But she had one thing they didn't, a heart that refused to go cold. I've prepared breakfast, Rosemary said quietly, gesturing to the dining room where she'd spent the last hour, setting out fresh bread, eggs, bacon, and the honey pastries Tanya loved. And I've stoked all the fires. The temperature is dropping fast. Of course it is. It's winter, you simpleton. Helga swept past her toward the dining room. Honestly, your father should have left you with the orphans at the Pack's charity house. At least there you might have learned to be useful. Rosemary's throat tightened, but she'd learned long ago that tears only made things worse. She followed them to the dining room, taking her seat at the far end of the table, the end closest to the drafty window where ice crystals had formed on the inside of the glass. The Silver Pine territory was brutal in winter. The mountains rose like frozen teeth against the sky, and the valleys between them became death traps when the storms hit. This year was shaping up to be the worst in decades. Already, 3 wolves had died from exposure, and it was only December. The Alpha has called a gathering tonight, Tanya announced, scrolling through her phone. Something about the storm system moving in. Mandatory attendance for all ranked wolves. Ranked wolves, Helga repeated, shooting a pointed look at Rosemary. You'll stay here, of course. Mind the fires and prepare a hot meal for when we return. Try not to burn down the lodge while we're gone. Yes, Helga. Rosemary pushed eggs around her plate. She wasn't hungry anyway. Tanya leaned back in her chair, studying Rosemary with those calculating blue eyes. You know, Rosemary, I almost feel sorry for you. Almost. If you weren't so pathetically grateful for every scrap of attention, maybe someone would respect you." "Tanya's right," Helga added, sipping her coffee. "Your weakness invites cruelty. In the wolf world, that makes you prey, not pack." The words landed like physical blows, but Rosemary kept her face neutral. She'd become an expert at disappearing inside herself, at building walls so high that their cruelty couldn't quite reach the soft parts of her that still hoped, still dreamed, still believed she was worth something. After breakfast, she cleared the table alone while Helga and Tanya prepared for the gathering. The lodge was massive. 8 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a commercial kitchen, and a great room with a stone fireplace large enough to roast a whole deer. It had been her father's pride and joy, built with his own hands before he met Helga. Now it felt like a beautiful prison. Rosemary spent the afternoon chopping wood, checking the generator, and ensuring the backup heating systems were functional. The temperature had dropped 15 degrees since morning, and the weather reports predicted a massive storm system moving in by nightfall. The kind of storm that killed wolves who were caught unprepared. She was stacking firewood in the mudroom when she heard the convoy of vehicles departing for pack headquarters. Through the window, she watched Helga's luxury SUV disappear down the mountain road, Tanya's sports car close behind. Finally, silence. Rosemary let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. For the next few hours, the lodge was hers. No criticism, no contempt, no reminders of how little she mattered. She made herself tea and settled into the window seat overlooking the valley. Snow had begun falling, thick flakes that caught the dying light. Beautiful and deadly. The mountains had a way of reminding wolves that nature didn't care about rank or bloodline. A blizzard would kill an alpha just as easily as an omega. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it made her sad. Her wolf stirred restlessly. Something felt wrong. The air had that electric quality that came before major storms. And the wind carried scents that made her instincts scream warnings. Rosemary moved to the fireplace, adding logs and stoking the flames higher. She checked the windows, ensuring all the seals were tight. She filled pots with water in case the pipes froze. She did everything her father had taught her about surviving mountain winters. Then she heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the wind, scratching, at the back door. Rosemary's wolf surged forward, hackles raised. Every instinct screamed danger. Rogues sometimes attacked during storms, using the weather as cover. She grabbed the silver knife from the kitchen drawer, one of the few things her father had left her, and approached the door cautiously. The scratching came again, weaker this time, desperate. Through the window beside the door, she saw them, wolves, 7 of them, collapsed in the snow outside her door. Their fur was crusted with ice, their bodies trembling violently. Even from inside, she could see the fog of their labored breathing. They were dying. Rosemary's heart lurched. She should call pack headquarters. She should wait for Helga to return. She should do anything except open that door because inviting strange wolves into your home was dangerous, stupid, potentially fatal. But then one of the wolves lifted its head, and she saw its eyes. Blue, startlingly blue. Human awareness burning behind the animal gaze. They weren't rogues. They were pack wolves, shifted wolves caught in the storm. The wolf's mouth opened, and somehow, impossibly, a single word emerged, rough and broken, but unmistakable. Please. Rosemary's hands moved before her brain could stop them. She threw open the door, and the winter storm rushed in like a living thing, stealing her breath and burning her lungs. "Inside!" she commanded, her voice stronger than she'd ever heard it. "Now!" The wolves didn't need to be told twice. They crawled across the threshold, one by one, leaving trails of melting snow and ice. They were massive, alpha-sized, every one of them. Their scents were wrong, though, muted and strange, as if something had suppressed their true nature. The last wolf collapsed just inside the door. Rosemary slammed it shut and threw the bolt, her heart hammering. 7 strange wolves. In her home, during a blizzard that would last for days. What had she done? Chapter 2. The 7 Strangers. The wolves lay scattered across her great room floor like broken statues, their sides heaving with each labored breath. Steam rose from their ice-crusted fur as the warmth of the lodge began to penetrate their frozen bodies. Rosemary's hands trembled as she locked the door and turned to face what she'd done. 7 wolves, 7 massive, unknown wolves who could kill her the moment they regained their strength. Her Omega instinct screamed at her to submit, to cower, to make herself as small and unthreatening as possible. But a deeper part of her, the part that remembered her father teaching her about honor and duty, pushed her forward. "You're safe now," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "But I need you to shift back. I can't help you if I don't know what I'm dealing with." None of them moved. Their eyes tracked her, intelligent and aware, but they remained in wolf form. Rosemary grabbed blankets from the linen closet, her mind racing. They were too cold to shift. That had to be it. Hypothermia prevented the change. She'd read about it in her father's journals. A wolf needed core body temperature stability to shift safely, and these 7 were barely clinging to life. She worked quickly, methodically. First, she dragged the largest wolf, a massive beast with midnight black fur, closer to the fireplace. His eyes fluttered closed as she covered him with blankets, and she felt his body shudder with relief. One by one, she moved them. The silver-gray wolf with a distinctive scar across his muzzle, the dark brown wolf whose left ear was torn, the russet-colored wolf with amber eyes, the charcoal wolf with white markings on his chest, the slate-gray wolf who was smallest of the 7, but still twice her size, the tawny wolf whose fur seemed to shimmer in the firelight. Each one allowed her to move them without protest, too weak to resist even if they'd wanted to. Rosemary filled bowls with warm water and knelt beside the black wolf. "Drink," she urged, tilting his massive head. "Slowly." His tongue emerged, lapping weakly at the water. The others watched, and she moved between them, offering water to each in turn. Some drank greedily. Others could barely manage a few laps before their heads dropped back to the floor. "What were you doing out there?" she murmured, checking the russet wolf's paws. His pads were cracked and bleeding from the ice. The storm warnings went out hours ago. Every pack wolf should have been at headquarters or secured in their homes. The russet wolf's amber eyes met hers, and she saw something flicker there. Shame? Regret? She grabbed her father's old medical kit from the storage room and began treating the injuries she could see: frostbite on the ears and tails, cracked paw pads, patches of fur torn away by wind and ice. As she worked, she kept up a steady stream of one-sided conversation. "My father used to say that the mountains test everyone eventually," she said, applying salve to the silver-gray wolf's damaged paws. "He said that survival wasn't about being the strongest or the fastest. It was about being smart enough to know when to seek shelter and humble enough to accept help when it was offered." The silver-gray wolf made a sound, not quite a whimper, not quite a growl. Acknowledgement. An hour passed, then 2. The wind outside had become a shrieking monster that rattled the windows and hurled snow against the walls. The temperature inside the lodge was dropping despite the roaring fire, and Rosemary knew the backup generator would kick on soon. She was arranging more blankets around the charcoal wolf when she felt it, the strange ripple in the air that signaled a shift beginning. The black wolf convulsed, his body contorting as bones realigned and fur receded. Rosemary quickly looked away, giving him privacy, and tossed a blanket in his direction. "Thank you." The voice was deep, rough with cold and exhaustion. She turned slowly. The man sitting where the black wolf had been was stunning. Sharp features, dark hair, and those same piercing blue eyes. He clutched the blanket around his waist, his muscular chest still shaking with cold. "Who are you?" Rosemary asked, maintaining distance between them. "Why were you dying outside my door?" "My name is Lucas Morrison." He coughed, his breath still fog in the air. "And we weren't supposed to be here. We were supposed to be dead." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What?" Before Lucas could answer, another shift began. The silver-gray wolf transformed into a man with platinum blonde hair and a face full of old scars. Then the russet wolf became a broad-shouldered man with kind amber eyes. One by one, they shifted back, and Rosemary found herself surrounded by 7 naked, shivering men in her great room. She grabbed every blanket, towel, and spare piece of fabric she could find and threw them at the group. "Cover yourselves. Then someone better start explaining." The tawny wolf, now a lean man with sharp features and calculating eyes, spoke first. "We're Elite Guard, Alpha Ricky Mason's personal protection unit." Rosemary's blood ran cold. The Elite Guard, the 7 most dangerous wolves in the Silver Pine Pack, warriors trained from childhood to kill without hesitation, to follow orders without question, to protect the Alpha bloodline above all else. She'd invited 7 killers into her home. "The Alpha ordered us into the mountains tonight," Lucas continued, his voice gaining strength. "He said there was a rogue incursion at the eastern border, said it was urgent, couldn't wait for the storm to pass." "So you went," Rosemary said slowly, "and there was no incursion." "There was nothing," the scarred blonde man said bitterly. "Just empty mountains and a death trap of a storm. By the time we realized we'd been sent on a fool's errand, the weather had turned catastrophic. We tried to make it back, but you would have died," Rosemary finished. She moved to the kitchen, her mind racing. Why would Alpha Ricky Mason send his own elite guard to die in a blizzard? The 7 men exchanged dark looks. Finally, the smallest of them, the slate-gray wolf, now a wiry man with intelligent dark eyes, spoke. "Because we know something we shouldn't, and the Alpha wants us silenced before we can reveal it." Rosemary's hands froze on the kettle she'd been filling. "What do you know?" "That Alpha Ricky Mason isn't the true heir to the Silver Pine Pack," Lucas said quietly. "And that the woman he's planning to take as his Luna is complicit in covering up the real Alpha's existence." The world tilted. Rosemary gripped the counter for support. "Tanya? You're talking about Tanya Moore? You know her?" The amber-eyed man, whose name she didn't yet know, leaned forward, wincing at the movement. "She's my stepsister." The words came out hollow. "And Alpha Ricky Mason is her intended mate. The mating ceremony is scheduled for the spring solstice." The 7 men went silent. Outside, the wind howled like a creature in pain. "Your stepsister," Lucas repeated slowly, "which means Helga McBride is your stepmother." "Yes." Rosemary forced herself to move, to continue making tea, even though her hands shook. "My father mated with her 6 years ago. He died a year later. Helga got everything, his property, his status, his seat on the pack council. I got nothing. Except this lodge," the scarred blonde observed, looking around. "This was your father's, wasn't it? His personal sanctuary?" "It was supposed to be mine when I came of age." Rosemary poured boiling water over tea bags, the familiar ritual grounding her. "But Helga claimed it as part of the estate. She lets me live here because I'm useful. I maintain the property, prepare meals when she visits, stay out of sight during pack functions." "Because you're Omega," the wiry man said softly. It wasn't a question. "Because I'm nothing." The bitterness surprised her. She usually kept those feelings locked away. "In case you haven't noticed, I don't rate high enough to warrant death threats or assassination attempts. I'm the pack's invisible girl." Lucas stood, keeping the blanket wrapped around his waist. Despite his obvious weakness, he moved with the grace of a trained warrior. "Not anymore. You saved 7 lives tonight. The moment we walked through that door, you became part of whatever conspiracy wants us dead." Rosemary's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Nobody cares what an Omega does or doesn't do. I could harbor fugitives for years and no one would notice." "Someone will notice when we don't die," the amber-eyed man said grimly. "Someone will come looking, and when they find us here with you, they'll kill her too," the tawny-haired man finished, "to tie up loose ends." The teacup slipped from Rosemary's fingers and shattered on the floor. She stared at the 7 men. 7 elite warriors who'd been sent to die, who'd crawled to her door in desperation, who'd inadvertently dragged her into something far more dangerous than a blizzard. "Then I suppose," she said quietly, kneeling to pick up the broken pieces, "we'd better make sure no one finds you." Lucas crossed the room and knelt beside her, his large hands carefully gathering the shattered ceramic. "Why are you helping us? You don't know us. We could be lying. We could be dangerous." Rosemarie met his blue eyes. "Because 7 wolves begged at my door, and I'm not the kind of person who turns away someone in need, even if it costs me everything." For a long moment, Lucas simply stared at her. Then something shifted in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, or respect. "What's your name?" he asked. "Rosemarie Love." "Well, Rosemarie Love," Lucas said, a faint smile touching his lips despite their dire situation. "You just became the most dangerous Omega in the Silver Pine Pack." Outside, the storm raged on, and inside the lodge, 7 condemned men and 1 invisible girl began to realize that sometimes the ones the world overlooks are the only ones brave enough to change it. Chapter 3. Secrets in the Snow. The storm didn't stop. If anything, it intensified as the night deepened, transforming the world outside into a white void where nothing existed beyond the howling wind and endless snow. Inside the lodge, Rosemarie moved through the space like a ghost, checking windows, stoking fires, preparing food that the 7 men desperately needed. They'd given her their names now, and she repeated them silently as she worked, committing each one to memory. Lucas Morrison, the Black Wolf, their unofficial leader. Neil Lindsay, the scarred blonde with eyes that had seen too much violence. Dave Walker, the broad-shouldered russet wolf with amber eyes that still held kindness despite everything. Tony Taylor, the dark brown wolf with the torn ear, quiet and watchful. Blake Snyder, the charcoal wolf with white markings, who kept glancing at the windows as if expecting attack. Virgil Stafford, the wiry slate-gray wolf whose intelligence burned behind every word. Trevor Carney, the tawny wolf whose lean frame concealed predatory strength. 7 names, 7 lives now tangled with hers. "You should eat something," Dave said, appearing beside her in the kitchen. He'd found spare clothes in one of the guest rooms, her father's old things that Helga had never bothered to remove. They fit him poorly, too small across the shoulders, but at least he was covered. "I'm fine." Rosemarie stirred the large pot of stew she'd assembled from the lodge's stores. Venison, potatoes, carrots, herbs. Enough to feed an army, because these men needed calories to recover from their near-death experience. "You haven't stopped moving in 3 hours." Dave's voice was gentle, concerned. "You're going to collapse." "I'm Omega," she said automatically. "We're built to serve. It's what we do." His hand covered hers on the spoon, stopping her constant stirring. "That's not what you are. That's what they told you to believe." Rosemarie looked up at him, startled. His amber eyes held no pity, no condescension, just recognition, as if he saw something in her that others had missed. "The stew's ready," she said quietly, pulling her hand away. "Help me carry it to the others." In the great room, the remaining 6 men had arranged themselves around the fireplace, still weak but recovering. Virgil had found her father's old journals and was flipping through them with obvious interest. Neil was methodically checking the lodge's security, testing locks and examining sight lines. The others simply rested, their bodies healing at the accelerated rate that shifters possessed. Rosemarie ladled stew into bowls and distributed them. The men ate in silence at first, too hungry for conversation. She perched on the edge of the window seat, her own bowl untouched in her lap, and watched them. They didn't look like killers. They looked like men who'd been betrayed by the people they'd sworn to protect. "You said you know something dangerous," she finally said. "About Alpha Ricky Mason not being the true heir. What did you mean?" Lucas set down his empty bowl and leaned forward. 3 weeks ago, we were assigned to escort Alpha Ricky Mason to a meeting with the Council of Alphas in the Eastern Territories. Standard protection detail. But during the journey, We stopped at a small pack on the border, the Moonstone Pack. "I've never heard of them," Rosemary said. "Most haven't. They're isolated, traditional, keep to themselves." Lucas's jaw tightened. While Alpha Ricky Mason met with their leader, we were offered hospitality in their pack house. Their elder, an old woman named Georgina Noble, took one look at us and said something strange. Trevor picked up the story. She said, 7 wolves to guard a false king, while the true Alpha sleeps in ignorance." We thought she was senile, but she grabbed Lucas's arm and wouldn't let go. Said she'd seen it in a vision, that Silverpine Pack was being led by a usurper, and that the real heir had been hidden away to prevent a challenge. Vision? Rosemary's skepticism must have shown on her face. "Georgina Noble is a seer," Virgil interjected, looking up from the journal. "One of the last true ones. Her visions have predicted pack wars, natural disasters, alpha deaths. The Council of Alphas consults her on major decisions. She's never been wrong." A chill ran down Rosemary's spine. "What else did she say?" "That the usurper's mate-to-be knows the truth," Neil said, his scarred face grim. "That she's been complicit from the beginning, helping to conceal the real heir's existence. And that if the false king takes his Luna and solidifies his claim, the true Alpha will never be found." Tanya. They were talking about Tanya. Rosemary's mind raced. Tanya had always been ambitious, always hungry for power and status. But this? Helping to hide the true Alpha of the Silverpine Pack? "You still haven't explained why Alpha Ricky Mason would send you to die," she said. "Because we made a mistake." Blake's voice was bitter. "We told him about the vision. We thought he deserved to know that rumors were circulating about his legitimacy. We thought he'd want to investigate, to prove the old woman wrong." "Instead, he smiled," Tony said quietly. "It was the first time he'd spoken since shifting back. He thanked us for our loyalty. He said he'd look into it personally, and then tonight, he sent us into a blizzard to die." The implications crashed over Rosemary like an avalanche. "He knows. Alpha Ricky Mason knows he's not the real heir." "More than that," Lucas said. "He's been actively suppressing the truth, which means somewhere out there, the real Alpha of the Silverpine Pack exists, and Ricky Mason has either hidden them away or killed them," Rosemary whispered. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Outside, the wind threw snow against the windows with renewed fury. "We started digging after that meeting," Virgil said, setting aside the journal. "Quietly, carefully. We looked into the pack's history, the Alpha bloodline, births and deaths over the last 30 years, and we found something." He pulled a waterproof folder from his discarded gear. They'd carried their packs even in wolf form, testament to their training. From it, he extracted several documents, slightly damp but readable. 28 years ago, Alpha Gregory Mason and his Luna Clara had twin sons, Virgil continued, Ricky and Reginald. According to pack records, Reginald died at birth, stillborn, a tragedy for the Alpha family. "But he didn't die," Rosemary said, the pieces clicking together. "We don't think so. We found hospital records that don't match the official story. 2 healthy Alpha-born males, both breathing, both viable." Virgil spread the documents on the floor. Then, 18 years ago, the Alpha and Luna died in a rogue attack. Convenient timing. Ricky Mason, only 10 years old, became Alpha-in-waiting under the regency of his uncle, Thomas Mason. "Thomas Mason, who died 5 years ago," Dave added, "right before Ricky Mason came of age and assumed full Alpha authority." "Also convenient," Neil muttered. Rosemary stood and moved closer to examine the documents. Her father had taught her to read pack records, and even with her limited experience, she could see the discrepancies. Dates that didn't align, medical notes that had been altered, death certificates with suspicious signatures. "This is why he wanted you dead," she said. "You have proof that his entire claim to the Alpha position is built on lies and possibly murder." "Proof that would be buried with us in the mountains," Lucas confirmed. "If not for you." The weight of that statement settled over the room. 7 lives, 1 Omega, and documents that could topple the current Alpha from power. The real heir could be anyone, Rosemary said slowly. If Reginald Mason survived, he could have been adopted out, hidden with another pack, raised under a different name. He might not even know who he is. That's the problem, Trevor said. Finding him, if he's even alive, would require resources we don't have, and time we definitely don't have. The moment this storm breaks, Alpha Ricky Mason will send wolves to confirm our deaths. When they find our bodies missing, he'll know someone helped us, Blake finished, and he'll start investigating. How long before the storm clears? Dave asked. Rosemary moved to the window, peering into the white chaos beyond. At least 2 days, maybe 3. Mountain storms like this don't pass quickly. 2 days to figure out our next move, Lucas said. 2 days to find evidence of where Reginald Mason might be. 2 days before we become hunted instead of hunters. There's something else. Rosemary turned back to face them, her heart hammering. Helga and Tanya left for pack headquarters before the storm hit. If they're not snowed in there, they'll return here once it's safe. This lodge is their property, remember? They'll walk right through that door. The 7 men exchanged glances. Then we need to be gone before that happens, Neil said. Gone where? Rosemary asked. Every pack member will be looking for you. Every territory will be on alert once Alpha Ricky Mason spreads the word that his elite guard went rogue. She's right, Virgil said. We're too recognizable. 7 elite warriors traveling together? We'd be caught within days. Unless we split up, Tony suggested. 7 separate targets are easier to hunt than one group, Lucas countered. We stay together, or we don't survive. The debate continued, voices rising as exhaustion and fear took their toll. Rosemary watched them argue, these 7 powerful men who'd been reduced to fugitives by a leader they'd trusted. They were warriors, trained for combat and strategy, but not for this kind of warfare, not for politics and conspiracy and invisible enemies. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Sometimes the strongest wolves are too proud to ask for help, and sometimes the weakest wolves are the only ones brave enough to offer it. There is another option, Rosemary heard herself say. The arguing stopped. 7 pairs of eyes turned to her. You stay here, she continued, her voice gaining strength, hidden, while I search for Reginald Mason. The reaction was immediate and unanimous. Absolutely not, Lucas said. Too dangerous, Dave added. You're Omega, Neil said flatly. No one would believe you have information worth hearing. That last comment stung, but Rosemary pushed past the pain. Exactly. I'm Omega. I'm invisible. I can move through the pack, ask questions, access records that you can't. No one pays attention to what I do or where I go. I'm beneath notice. Until you're not, Trevor said. Until someone realizes you're investigating the Alpha bloodline. Then you're dead. I'm already dead, Rosemary said quietly. I've been dying slowly in this pack for 6 years, watching Helga and Tanya strip away everything my father left me, everything I was supposed to be. At least this way, my death might mean something. Lucas stood and crossed to where she stood by the window. He was a full head taller, broader, stronger in every measurable way. But when he looked at her, she didn't see pity or dismissal in his blue eyes. You saved our lives tonight, he said. We won't repay that by letting you throw yours away. Then help me, Rosemary challenged. Teach me what to look for. Show me how to investigate without being caught. Give me something useful to do instead of just hiding 7 fugitives and hoping for the best. The storm howled outside, as if nature itself was waiting for their decision. Finally, Virgil spoke. She's right. We need someone on the inside, someone who can move freely, and an Omega investigating pack history wouldn't seem threatening, just strange. Strange I can work with, Rosemary said. This is insane, Blake muttered, but he didn't argue further. Lucas studied her for a long moment, then slowly he nodded. 2 days. We teach you everything we can about investigation and self-defense. You learn fast, you follow our instructions exactly, and you never take unnecessary risks. Deal?" Rosemarie extended her hand. "Deal." His grip was warm, strong, and for the first time in 6 years, Rosemarie felt like someone actually saw her. Not as an Omega, not as Helga's unwanted stepdaughter, but as someone capable of making a difference. "Get some rest," Lucas said, releasing her hand. "Tomorrow, your real training begins." As Rosemarie climbed the stairs to her small bedroom, she heard the men beginning to plan, their voices low and urgent. She paused at her door and looked back down at them. 7 warriors who'd been sentenced to death, now fighting for their lives in her father's lodge. She'd saved them tonight, but the question remained, could she save them tomorrow? And more importantly, could she save herself? Chapter 4. Training the Untrained. Rosemarie woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of male voices arguing downstairs. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Forgot about the 7 fugitives sleeping in her great room. Forgot about the storm still raging outside. Forgot about the impossible task she'd agreed to undertake. Then reality crashed back, and she was out of bed and dressed in minutes. The great room had been transformed overnight. Her father's old tactical maps covered one wall, marked with locations and notes in neat handwriting. The 7 men had organized themselves into a makeshift war room, and they barely glanced up when she descended the stairs. "Coffee's fresh," Dave called from the kitchen. "And I made breakfast. Hope you like scrambled eggs." Rosemarie blinked. An elite warrior had made her breakfast. The absurdity of the situation almost made her laugh. "The storm's still going strong," Neil reported, standing by the window with binoculars. "Visibility is maybe 10 feet. Nothing's moving out there." "Good." Lucas turned to face her, and Rosemarie was struck by how different he looked in the morning light. Still dangerous, still powerful, but more human somehow. "We've been planning your curriculum." "My what?" "Training schedule," Virgil clarified. He'd claimed her father's old desk and spread documents across every surface. "You have approximately 48 hours to learn what we spent years mastering. It's impossible, but we're going to try anyway." Trevor stood from where he'd been doing push-ups by the fireplace. "First lesson, physical awareness. You're small, you're Omega, and you have no combat training. That makes you vulnerable. We're going to teach you how to move through space without being noticed, and how to escape if someone does notice." "I already know how to be invisible," Rosemarie said quietly. "No," Lucas's voice was firm. "You know how to make yourself small. That's different from tactical invisibility. Being small is about shame. Being invisible is about strategy." The distinction hit her harder than she expected. He was right. She'd spent years shrinking herself, apologizing for existing, trying to take up as little space as possible. That wasn't strength. That was survival born from trauma. "Show me," she said. For the next 3 hours, they drilled her relentlessly. Neil taught her how to walk without making sound, how to move through a room without drawing the eye. Blake showed her sight lines and blind spots, the places where someone watching would naturally overlook. Tony demonstrated breathing techniques to slow her heartbeat and mask her fear scent. "Wolves rely heavily on scent," Tony explained, his torn ear twitching as he spoke. "But Omega scent is already muted. Use that. If you control your breathing and your fear response, you can move through a crowd of wolves and barely register." "Why didn't anyone teach me this before?" Rosemarie asked, frustrated after her 10th failed attempt to cross the room without Neil detecting her. "Because no one thought an Omega was worth teaching," Neil said bluntly. "In most packs, Omegas are treated as servants or worse. The idea that one might need combat or stealth skills never occurs to anyone." "Except us," Dave added, appearing with sandwiches for everyone. "We've seen Omega wolves do incredible things when given the chance. You're not less than us, Rosemarie. You're just untrained." The afternoon brought different lessons. Virgil taught her how to read pack documents, how to spot alterations and forgeries, which records were public and which required authorization to access. "The pack archives are in the basement of headquarters," he explained, showing her diagrams of the building's layout. They're supposed to be accessible to all pack members, but in practice, only ranked wolves ever request access. If you go there, you need a plausible reason. What kind of reason? Research for a personal project. Genealogy, maybe. Say you're trying to trace your father's lineage. Virgil's dark eyes met hers. It's not even a lie. Your father was Silver Pine Pack. You have every right to access those records. Helga will never allow it. Helga doesn't need to know, Trevor interjected. He'd been teaching her lock-picking for the last hour, and her fingers ached from the practice. You're going to learn how to access places you're not supposed to be, starting with this. He handed her a small leather case containing picks and tension wrenches. Every door in Pack headquarters uses the same basic lock system. Master this, and you can go anywhere. Rosemary stared at the tools. You're teaching me to break and enter. We're teaching you to survive, Lucas corrected. He'd been watching from the sidelines, occasionally offering advice, but mostly observing. When you're outmatched physically and politically, you use different weapons: intelligence, stealth, misdirection. And sometimes, Blake added with a grim smile, you just pick the damn lock and take what you need. As evening approached, the lessons shifted again. Dave pulled her into the kitchen while the others continued their planning. You need to eat more, he said gently, preparing another enormous meal. I've watched you all day. You barely touched breakfast, skipped lunch entirely. You can't function on coffee and adrenaline. I'm not hungry. That's the stress talking. He pushed a plate toward her, roasted chicken, vegetables, bread. Your body needs fuel, especially now. Rosemary picked at the food, her stomach in knots. Why are you all being so kind to me? I'm just the Omega who happened to answer the door. Dave set down his knife and turned to face her fully. You want the truth? We've served under Alpha Ricky Mason for 5 years. We've watched him abuse his power, manipulate pack members, crush anyone who questions his authority. And through it all, we told ourselves it was our duty to protect the Alpha, no matter what. He paused, his amber eyes haunted. Then we met you, an Omega who saved 7 lives without hesitation, knowing it would put you in danger. You didn't ask what we could offer you. You didn't demand payment or favors. You just helped, because it was the right thing to do. That doesn't make me special, Rosemary said quietly. That just makes me decent. In a world where decency is rare, especially from those in power, yes, it makes you special. Dave returned to his cooking. Eat. You're going to need your strength. That night, after another meal shared around the fireplace, Lucas called everyone together. Tomorrow is day 2, he said. Our last full day before the storm breaks and decisions have to be made. Rosemary, you've learned a lot today, but we need to talk about the hardest part. What's that? What happens when you get caught? His expression was grave. And you will get caught eventually. Maybe not tomorrow or next week, but if you keep investigating Alpha Ricky Mason, he'll notice. And when he does, you need to know how to handle it. Trevor stood and began pacing. Rule 1, never admit anything. Even if they have evidence, even if they think they know everything, you deny until there's no other option. Rule 2, Neil continued, always have an escape route planned. Know every exit, every window, every possible way out before you enter a space. Rule 3, Blake said, if escape isn't possible, make noise. Scream, fight, cause a scene. Predators rely on victims being quiet. Don't be quiet. And Rule 4, Virgil added softly, if they're going to kill you anyway, take at least one of them with you. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. This is really happening, Rosemary whispered. I'm actually going to do this. You don't have to, Lucas said immediately. We can find another way. We can run, try to reach another pack, appeal to the Council of Alphas, and be killed on the road, Rosemary interrupted, or dismissed as traitors spreading lies about a legitimate alpha. No, you need someone on the inside, someone no one suspects, someone who has access to the places and people you can't reach. She stood, moving to the window where snow continued to fall in thick curtains. My father used to tell me a story about the mountains. He said that in winter, the strongest trees often break under the weight of snow because they're too rigid to bend. But the small, flexible branches survive because they know how to give way to pressure without breaking. She turned back to face them. You're the strong trees, powerful, trained, dangerous. But right now, you need a flexible branch, someone who can bend without breaking, who can survive in spaces you can't. Tony, who'd been silent for most of the evening, finally spoke. Your father sounds like he was a wise man. He was. Rosemary's throat tightened. He was also murdered by rogues in an attack that conveniently happened shortly after he opposed some of Alpha Ricky Mason's policies in the Pack Council. I was too young to understand the implications then. But now you're wondering if it was really rogues, Lucas said quietly. Now I'm wondering how many deaths Alpha Ricky Mason is responsible for. Rosemary met each of their eyes in turn. My father's, possibly the true heirs. Yours if I don't do this. How many more before someone stops him? The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Outside, the wind had shifted direction, hurling snow against a different set of windows. Finally, Dave spoke. Then we make sure you're as prepared as possible. Tomorrow we drill everything again. Stealth, lockpicking, document analysis, escape routes. We run scenarios until you can handle them in your sleep. And we give you this. Virgil produced a small device that looked like a modified cell phone. Emergency communicator. Encrypted, untraceable. If you're in trouble, you hit this button and we come running. Even if it means exposing yourselves? Rosemary asked. Especially then, Lucas said firmly. You don't die for us. That's non-negotiable. Rosemary took the device, its weight both comforting and terrifying. What if I fail? What if I can't find anything useful, or I get caught before I learn anything important? Then we regroup and try something else, Neil said. This isn't a suicide mission, it's intelligence gathering. You go in, you look around, you get out. Nothing heroic, nothing stupid. Just one Omega asking questions about her family history, Trevor added. Perfectly innocent. Until it's not, Blake muttered. Lucas shot him a warning look before turning back to Rosemary. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be intense. As the others settled in for the night, Rosemary climbed the stairs to her room once more. She stood at her window, watching the storm that had brought 7 strangers to her door and irrevocably changed her life. 24 hours ago, she'd been invisible, forgotten, a ghost haunting her own existence. Now she was the only hope for 7 condemned men and possibly the key to uncovering a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of pack leadership. Her father had taught her that the mountains tested everyone eventually. She just hadn't expected her test to come in the form of a blizzard, 7 fugitive warriors, and a truth that could destroy everything she'd ever known. But as she watched the snow fall, Rosemary felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Purpose. Tomorrow the real work would begin. Tomorrow she would transform from victim to warrior, from invisible to invaluable. Tomorrow the Omega would start fighting back, and heaven help anyone who stood in her way. Chapter 5. The Storm Breaks. The second day of training began before dawn. Rosemary woke to find Lucas waiting outside her bedroom door, his expression serious. No warning this time, he said. You have 60 seconds to dress, arm yourself with whatever you can find, and meet me downstairs without making a sound, starting now. Her heart lurched, but she didn't argue. The moment he disappeared down the hallway, she moved. Jeans, thermal shirt, boots. The silver knife her father had given her went into her boot. The emergency communicator went into her pocket. She grabbed a hair tie and secured her mousy brown hair as she descended the stairs, counting the seconds in her head. 58, 59, 60. She stepped into the great room to find all 7 men waiting, arranged in a semicircle like judges. 53 seconds, Lucas said. Not bad, but if someone breaks into your room intent on killing you, those 7 seconds could be fatal. Again. This time, 45 seconds. They ran the drill 12 times. By the end, Rosemarie could dress, arm herself, and reach the great room in 38 seconds without making a sound loud enough for Neil's enhanced hearing to detect. "Better," Neil acknowledged. "But you favored your right side when you moved. Anyone watching would notice. Compensate." Breakfast was a working meal. They ate while Virgil quizzed her on pack hierarchy, building layouts, and document classification systems. When she hesitated on an answer, he made her run it again until she could recite the information without thinking. "Knowledge has to be automatic," he explained. "If you're in pack headquarters and someone asks you a question, you can't pause to remember. Hesitation looks like guilt." "What if I genuinely don't know something?" Rosemarie asked. Then you smile, act embarrassed, and say you've been so focused on your personal research that you forgot basic information. Play to their expectations. Omegas are supposed to be scattered, emotional, forgetful. Use their prejudices against them. The words should have stung, but Rosemarie was beginning to understand. Her Omega status wasn't a weakness to overcome. It was camouflage to exploit. Mid-morning brought combat drills. Trevor and Blake taught her pressure points, vulnerable areas, and dirty fighting techniques. "You're never going to win a fair fight against a ranked wolf," Trevor said bluntly. "So don't fight fair. Eyes, throat, groin. Make them hurt and run." "What if running isn't an option?" Blake handed her a small canister. "Pepper spray, modified for shifter physiology. It'll drop even an alpha for about 90 seconds. Use it and get distance." 90 seconds isn't much time. "It's enough to reach a public space where witnesses can see you," Blake countered. "Predators don't like audiences." They practiced scenarios. Blake would grab her from behind, and she had to break free and reach the safe zone marked by the fireplace. Trevor would block her path, and she had to talk her way past him or find an alternative route. Tony would appear silently from hiding, and she had to detect him before he got within striking distance. She failed more often than she succeeded, but each failure taught her something new: where she was vulnerable, how to read body language, when to fight, and when to flee. "You're thinking too much," Dave observed during a water break. "Your instincts are good, but you second-guess them. Trust your gut." "My gut tells me I'm going to die doing this," Rosemarie said. "Then your gut is smart," Dave replied. "But your courage is stronger. That's what matters." After lunch, Virgil produced a set of copied documents, the evidence they'd gathered about Alpha Ricky Mason's fraudulent claim to power. "Memorize these," he said. "Every detail. If you find similar documents in the archives, you need to know what you're looking at immediately." Rosemarie studied the papers until her eyes ached. Birth certificates, hospital records, death certificates, pack registry entries. She learned to spot the telltale signs of alteration: ink that didn't quite match, signatures that seemed traced rather than written naturally, dates that conflicted with other documented events. Alpha Gregory Mason and Luna Clara had their twins on March 15th, she recited. According to hospital records, both were healthy. But the death certificate for Reginald Mason is dated March 14th, the day before he was born. "Exactly," Virgil said. "Someone didn't even bother to make the dates consistent. They were either sloppy or arrogant enough to think no one would check." "Probably both," Neil muttered from his position by the window. As afternoon faded to evening, the wind outside began to change. The howling fury that had raged for 2 days started to diminish, replaced by a lighter, less violent sound. "Storm's breaking," Neil announced. "We've got maybe 12 hours before travel becomes possible again." The atmosphere in the lodge shifted immediately. Their borrowed time was running out. Lucas called everyone together for a final briefing. "We need to discuss logistics. Rosemarie, when do Helga and Tanya typically return from pack headquarters?" "It depends. If they stayed there for social reasons, they might linger another day or two. But if they were just there for the gathering," Rosemarie calculated quickly, "they could arrive as soon as tomorrow afternoon, which gives us tonight to finalize our plan and hide any evidence of our presence," Trevor said. "Where will you go?" Rosemarie asked. "You can't stay here once they return, but you also can't leave the territory without being spotted." The 7 men exchanged glances. Finally, Lucas spoke. "There's a system of caves about 3 miles north of here. old mining tunnels from when the territory was first settled. They're marked as condemned on official maps, but they're actually stable if you know which passages to use. We've used them before for training exercises, Dave added. They're cold and miserable, but they'll keep us hidden. 3 miles in this weather, in your condition? Rosemary shook her head. You're not fully recovered from the hypothermia. The journey could kill you. Staying here will definitely kill us, Blake pointed out. Not if we're smart about it. Rosemary moved to the window, her mind racing. This lodge has a basement. It was built into the mountain itself, with storage rooms my father used for emergency supplies. Helga never goes down there. She considers it beneath her. You could hide there, and I could bring you food and supplies. Too risky, Neil said immediately. If they find you in the caves, you're trapped underground with no escape route, Rosemary countered. At least here, you have options. Multiple exits, supplies, and me running interference. She's right, Virgil said slowly. The caves are a death trap if we're discovered. Here, we at least have tactical advantages. Lucas studied Rosemary with those intense blue eyes. You're asking us to trust you with our lives. Completely. Yes. And if Helga or Tanya suspect something? If they question your behavior or search the lodge? Then I lie, Rosemary said simply. I've been lying to survive for 6 years. I can do it a little longer. Tony spoke up, his quiet voice cutting through the debate. The question isn't whether we trust Rosemary. We already do, or we wouldn't be here. The question is whether we're willing to put her in more danger by staying. I'm already in danger, Rosemary said. The moment I opened that door, I chose a side. You staying or leaving doesn't change that. But it might change whether you survive long enough to expose the truth. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind had dropped to a whisper. We stay, Lucas decided. But we follow Rosemary's lead. This is her territory, her home. We're guests, and guests follow house rules. Relief and terror warred in Rosemary's chest. They were staying, 7 fugitives in her basement, depending on her to keep them alive and hidden. Then we need to move you tonight, she said, forcing her voice to remain steady, before daylight makes it too risky. I'll show you the basement access and help you bring down supplies. They worked through the evening, transforming the lodge's basement from a dusty storage area into a livable hideout. Rosemary's father had stored camping equipment, emergency rations, and medical supplies down there. She'd always thought it was excessive preparation. Now she was grateful for his paranoia. Your father was a prepper, Virgil observed, examining the neatly organized supplies. He called it respecting the mountains, Rosemary said. He said that nature doesn't care about your rank or your power. A blizzard will kill an alpha just as easily as an omega, so smart wolves prepare for the worst. Smart wolves survive, Dave agreed. They set up sleeping areas, arranged supplies, and established a communication system. Rosemary would knock 3 times on the basement door when it was safe to move around. Any other pattern meant danger. As they finished, Lucas pulled Rosemary aside. Tomorrow, you start your investigation, but I need you to promise me something. What? At the first sign of real danger, not discomfort, not inconvenience, but actual life-threatening danger, you run. You forget about us, you grab what you can, and you run. I won't abandon you. You won't die for us either, Lucas said firmly. His hands gripped her shoulders, warm and solid. We're trained warriors who chose this fight. You're a civilian who got caught in the crossfire. Those are very different things. I stopped being a civilian when I pulled you through that door, Rosemary said. I'm part of this now, whether you like it or not. Stubborn Omega, Lucas muttered, but there was a hint of admiration in his voice. Arrogant Alpha, she shot back, then froze. You're not actually Alpha, are you? I mean, your rank... Beta, Lucas said. High Beta, but not Alpha. Why? Just something about the way you all defer to you, the way you make decisions. Rosemary studied him. You lead like an Alpha. Leadership isn't about rank, Lucas said quietly. It's about who's willing to make the hard calls when it matters. Remember that, Rosemary. In the coming days, you're going to have to make impossible choices. Trust yourself to make them." As midnight approached, the 7 men descended into the basement. Rosemary stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at them. "Stay safe," she said. "Stay smart," Lucas replied. "And remember, 3 knocks means all clear. Anything else means run." She closed the door and slid the bolt into place. From the outside, it looked like nothing more than a storage area entrance. From the inside, it was a hiding place for 7 wolves who'd trusted an Omega with their lives. Rosemary moved through the lodge, erasing evidence of their presence. She washed dishes, folded blankets, returned her father's journals to their shelves. By the time she finished, it looked exactly as it had before 7 frozen wolves had collapsed on her doorstep. She climbed to her room and stood at the window, watching the storm's final gasps. Dawn was coming, and with it, a return to the world that had spent 6 years teaching her she was worthless. But she wasn't worthless. 7 warriors had trusted her. 7 lives depended on her ability to be brave, clever, and invisible all at once. Tomorrow she would return to Pack headquarters. Tomorrow she would smile at Helga's cruelty and ignore Tanya's contempt. Tomorrow she would walk into the archives and begin searching for a truth that powerful wolves had killed to hide. Tomorrow, the invisible Omega would become the most dangerous wolf in the Silverpine Pack, and no one would see her coming. Chapter 6. The Archives. Helga's phone call came at 9 in the morning, jarring Rosemary from a restless sleep. "We'll be returning this afternoon." Helga's voice was crisp, imperious. "The roads are clearing, and I refuse to spend another night in that dreadful guest suite at headquarters. Have the lodge prepared, fresh linens, a hot meal, and for heaven's sake, make sure the fires are properly stoked. I won't tolerate coming home to a cold house." "Yes, Helga," Rosemary said automatically. "And Rosemary, the Alpha has requested a meeting with all Pack members tomorrow evening. You will attend. Try not to embarrass yourself." The line went dead before Rosemary could respond. She sat on her bed, heart pounding. A mandatory Pack meeting, which meant she had less than 36 hours to access the archives, find useful information, and return before she was expected at headquarters alongside every other Pack member. 3 quiet knocks on the basement door. The all-clear signal. Lucas emerged first, his hair disheveled from sleep. "We heard. You're on a tighter timeline now." "Which means I need to go today," Rosemary said. "This morning, before Helga and Tanya return." "Absolutely not," Neil said, appearing behind Lucas. "You haven't had enough preparation. 1 day of training isn't sufficient for—" "1 day is all we have," Rosemary interrupted. She was already moving, pulling on clothes suitable for Pack headquarters. "The archives will be quieter this morning. Most wolves will still be recovering from the storm, dealing with property damage, checking on family. It's the perfect time." Dave appeared with a travel mug of coffee and a breakfast sandwich. "At least eat something first." Rosemary took both gratefully. "I'll drive to headquarters, say I'm there to help with storm cleanup if anyone asks. Then I'll slip into the archives during the afternoon shift change, when security is lightest." "You've memorized the layout?" Virgil asked. "Every floor, every corridor, every exit." She recited them quickly, proving her retention. "Lock-picking tools?" Trevor added. She patted her pocket where the small leather case rested. "Emergency communicator?" Blake prompted. She held up the device. "And if you're caught?" Tony asked quietly. "I'm just an Omega researching my family history," Rosemary said, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. "Perfectly innocent." Lucas handed her a folded piece of paper. "Names to look for. Start with these. If you find anything, birth records, death certificates, adoption papers, medical files, photograph them with your phone. Don't take originals. We need the Pack to believe those documents are still secure." Rosemary unfolded the paper and scanned the list. Reginald Mason, Gregory Mason, Clara Mason, Thomas Mason, Georgina Noble, Harold Love, her father. That last name made her breath catch. "Why my father?" "Because he opposed Alpha Ricky Mason's policies and died conveniently soon after," Lucas said gently. "If Ricky Mason is willing to kill to maintain his position, Your father might not have been killed by rogues. The world tilted. She'd suspected, but seeing it written out made it real. Find the truth, Lucas said. Whatever it is. We need to know what we're really fighting. 20 minutes later, Rosemarie was driving down the mountain road in her old sedan, her hands gripping the wheel tightly. The storm had left the world transformed, everything buried under feet of pristine snow, the trees bent under white weight, the sky a brilliant blue that hurt to look at. Beautiful and treacherous, just like everything else in her life. PAC headquarters loomed at the base of the mountain, a massive complex of buildings that served as the administrative and social center of Silver Pine Territory. The main building was modern glass and stone, all clean lines and expensive architecture. The archives were in the oldest section, a stone structure that had been part of the original settlement. She parked in the visitor lot and sat for a moment, breathing deeply, controlling her fear scent. You're just an Omega, no threat, beneath notice. The mantra steadied her. The main entrance was busy with wolves coming and going, dealing with post-storm logistics. Rosemarie slipped through, keeping her head down, her body language submissive. No one stopped her. No one even looked at her. Invisible, just like always. The archives entrance was on the second floor, down a corridor most wolves never used. As Virgil had predicted, the door was locked, but used a standard pin tumbler system. Rosemarie glanced both ways, then pulled out the lockpicking tools. Her hands shook. The picks felt clumsy and wrong. Breathe. Count the pins. Feel for the binding pin. Gentle pressure. Trevor's instructions echoed in her mind. She forced her hands steady and tried again. The lock clicked open. Rosemarie's heart soared even as terror flooded through her. She'd done it. She was actually doing this. The archives room was exactly as Virgil had described. Rows of filing cabinets, a few old computers for the digitized records, and dust thick enough to choke on. Clearly, not many wolves came here. She moved quickly to the section marked Alpha Family, Historical Records, and began searching. Gregory Mason, born 1965, mated to Clara Whitestone, 1987. PAC merger documents, territory agreements, council appointments, everything documenting the life of a legitimate alpha. Then she found it. A birth certificate dated March 15th, 28 years ago. Twins, Ricky and Reginald Mason, both listed as healthy, normal weight, breathing independently. She photographed it with trembling hands. Next, she found Reginald's death certificate, dated March 14th, the day before the birth certificate. Cause of death listed as stillborn. But the signature at the bottom was smudged, barely legible, and the ink was a different shade than the rest of the document. More photographs. She dug deeper. Hospital records from the human facility where the twins were born. Silver Pine PAC used human hospitals for complicated births, a safety measure in case medical intervention was needed. The records showed 2 healthy male infants, both released into parental custody. But there was a notation at the bottom of one page, almost hidden in the margin. Infant B, transferred to alternative care per parental request. Document sealed by court order. Infant B, the second born. Reginald. He hadn't died. He'd been given away. Rosemarie's hands shook as she photographed the page. Why would alpha parents give away one of their twin sons, especially alpha-born twins, which were rare and precious? She kept searching, losing track of time as she pulled file after file. She found her father's death report, killed by rogues during a territorial dispute. But there were inconsistencies. The location didn't match known rogue territories. The timing coincided exactly with the PAC council vote where her father had opposed Alpha Ricky Mason's proposal to consolidate power by eliminating the council's veto authority. More photographs, evidence mounting. She was so focused on the documents that she didn't hear the footsteps until it was too late. Well, what do we have here? Rosemarie spun, her heart stopping. Tanya stood in the doorway, her perfect hair and makeup immaculate despite the early hour. Behind her, 2 beta wolves from Alpha Ricky Mason's inner circle watched with cold eyes. Tanya. Rosemary fought to keep her voice steady. I didn't know you were back. Clearly. Tanya's gaze swept the archives room, taking in the open filing cabinets, the documents spread across the table, Rosemary's phone in her hand. What are you doing here, little sister? The endearment dripped with poison. Research, Rosemary said, falling back on her prepared excuse. Family history. I wanted to learn more about Father's lineage. In the Alpha family records section? Tanya moved closer, her heels clicking on the stone floor. That's interesting. Father was beta-born, wasn't he? His records would be in an entirely different section. Rosemary's mind raced. Think, adapt, survive. I got confused, she said, letting embarrassment color her voice. Playing to their expectations, scattered, emotional, forgetful Omega. The filing system is complicated, and You're lying. Tanya's voice went cold. You're standing in front of the Mason family records with your phone out, photographing documents. That's not confusion. That's espionage. The two beta wolves moved to block the door. Rosemary's hand drifted toward her pocket, toward the emergency communicator. Don't! Tanya caught the movement. Whatever you're reaching for, leave it alone. Blake, take her phone. One of the betas moved forward. Rosemary backed up, her Omega instincts screaming at her to submit, but Lucas's training overrode them. Eyes, throat, groin. Make them hurt and run. Stay back, she warned. Blake laughed. Or what? You'll hurt me? You're Omega, sweetheart. You couldn't hurt a mouse. He reached for her phone. Rosemary's hand moved instinctively. The silver knife from her boot was in her hand and at his throat before he could blink. I said, stay back. The room went silent. Blake froze, his eyes wide with genuine shock. Tanya's perfect composure cracked. You pulled a weapon on pack security, Tanya said slowly. That's an executable offense. He tried to take my property without cause, Rosemary countered, her voice stronger than she'd ever heard it. I have every right to defend myself. In the archives, photographing classified documents. The new voice came from the doorway, and Rosemary's blood turned to ice. Alpha Ricky Mason stepped into the room, his presence filling the space like a physical force. He was tall, golden-haired, every inch the powerful leader, and his eyes, as they fixed on Rosemary, held nothing but calculation. Well, he said softly, this is unexpected. The invisible Omega, suddenly very visible indeed. Rosemary kept the knife steady at Blake's throat, even as her mind screamed that she was dead. Lucas had been right. She'd been caught, and now she was going to pay the price. But if she was going to die, she'd make it mean something. These documents, she said, gesturing to the spread files. They're forgeries. Someone altered Reginald Mason's death certificate. Someone sealed hospital records that prove both twins survived. Someone has been lying about the Alpha bloodline for 28 years. Ricky Mason's smile was colder than the blizzard that had nearly killed 7 men. Is that so? And you think you, a worthless Omega, can prove such an accusation? I think the truth doesn't care about rank, Rosemary said. And I think you're terrified of what I might find, or you wouldn't be here personally. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Respect? Fear? Rage? Tanya, my love, he said, never taking his eyes off Rosemary. Take our guest to the detention cells. We'll discuss her accusations privately. With pleasure. Tanya's smile was victorious. Rosemary's hand moved to her pocket, hitting the emergency button on the communicator 3 times. The signal would reach the lodge. Lucas and the others would know she was in trouble, but they were 3 miles away, hiding in a basement. By the time they could reach her, if they even tried, it would be far too late. Blake grabbed her wrist, twisting until the knife clattered to the floor. The other beta pinned her arms. Rosemary fought, but 2 beta wolves against 1 Omega was no contest. Take the phone too, Ricky Mason ordered, and bring those documents. I want to know exactly what she found. As they dragged her from the archives, Rosemary caught one last glimpse of the birth certificate lying on the table. Evidence, proof, truth. And now, in the hands of the man who'd kill to keep it hidden, she'd failed. Failed the 7 warriors who'd trusted her. Failed her father's memory. Failed herself. The detention cells were in the basement of headquarters, cold stone rooms that smelled of fear and old blood. They threw her into one and slammed the door, the sound of the lock engaging like a death sentence. Rosemarie slid down the wall, her bravado crumbling. She was going to die here, alone, unmourned, another invisible Omega who'd overstepped. But then she remembered Lucas's words. At the first sign of real danger, you run. She hadn't run. She'd stood her ground, held a knife to a beta's throat, and accused the alpha of fraud to his face. Maybe she hadn't found the air. Maybe she'd been caught. But for the first time in her life, Rosemarie Love had refused to be invisible, and that, she thought, as tears streamed down her face, was worth something, even if it cost her everything. Chapter 7. The Truth Beneath the Lies. The detention cell was cold, dark, and smelled of despair. Rosemarie sat with her back against the stone wall, her mind racing through scenarios, each one worse than the last. They had her phone. They had the documents she'd found. They knew she'd been investigating the Alpha bloodline. And she had no way to warn Lucas and the others. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time moved strangely in the darkness. Rosemarie's stomach growled, reminding her that she'd barely eaten breakfast. Her throat was dry, her lips cracked. But worse than the physical discomfort was the knowledge that 7 men were waiting for her signal, unaware that she'd been captured. The door opened with a screech of metal on stone. Tanya entered, carrying a bottle of water and a bland sandwich. Behind her, one of the beta guards remained in the doorway, watching. "Eat," Tanya commanded, setting the items on the floor. "The Alpha wants you coherent for questioning." Rosemarie didn't move. "Where's Helga?" "Mother is being briefed on the situation." Tanya's smile was cruel. "She's very disappointed in you. Though honestly, I don't know why she expected anything different from an Omega with delusions of competence." "Is that what you tell yourself?" Rosemarie asked quietly. "That rank determines worth? That being born beta makes you better than me?" "It doesn't make me better," Tanya said. "It makes me relevant. You're a footnote, Rosemarie, a minor inconvenience that will be resolved and forgotten. Like Reginald Mason was forgotten?" Tanya's composure cracked for just a moment. "You don't know anything." "I know enough," Rosemarie said, pushing herself to her feet despite her exhaustion. "I know that Alpha Ricky Mason's twin brother didn't die at birth. I know he was transferred to alternative care and that the records were sealed. I know that makes your future mate a fraud." "Careful." Tanya's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You're already facing execution for assaulting PAC security. Don't add treason to the charges. Truth isn't treason. Truth is whatever the Alpha says it is." Tanya moved closer, her perfectly manicured hand reaching out to grip Rosemarie's chin, forcing eye contact. "You really don't understand how the world works, do you? Power makes truth, strength makes law, and you, little Omega, have neither." "Then why am I still alive?" Rosemarie jerked her chin free. "If I'm so irrelevant, so powerless, why not just kill me and be done with it?" Tanya's smile returned, cold and satisfied. "Because you're going to tell us who you're working with. And Omega doesn't just wake up one day and decide to investigate the Alpha bloodline. Someone put you up to this. Someone gave you information, and you're going to tell us who." Understanding crashed over Rosemarie like a wave. They thought she was working for someone else. They didn't realize she'd stumbled into this by accident, or rather, by opening her door to 7 dying wolves during a blizzard, which meant Lucas and the others were still safe, as long as she didn't break. "I'm working alone," Rosemarie said. "Liar." Tanya's hand moved fast, striking Rosemarie across the face. The Omega's head snapped to the side, pain exploding across her cheek. "Who sent you? Which rival pack?" "Which council member?" "No one," Rosemarie insisted, tasting blood where her teeth had cut her lip. "I wanted to know about my father's death, that's all." Another slap, harder this time. Rosemarie's vision blurred. "Your father was a traitor who opposed the Alpha's authority," Tanya hissed. "He got what traitors deserve, and so will you once you stop being stubborn and tell us the truth." Through the pain, Rosemary felt something crystallize inside her. Confirmation. Her father hadn't died in a random rogue attack. He'd been murdered for standing against Ricky Mason's consolidation of power. "My father," she said slowly, straightening despite the agony in her jaw, "was more of an alpha than Ricky Mason will ever be. That's why you had to kill him." Tanya's eyes went wide. "I never said—" "You just did." Rosemary smiled through the blood on her lips. "You confirmed he was killed for opposing the alpha. Thank you." The beta guard stepped forward, but Tanya waved him back. "You think you're clever," she said softly. "You think that little revelation matters. But who will you tell? You're locked in a cell. No one knows you're here. No one's coming to save you." Rosemary said nothing, because Tanya was wrong. 7 someones knew she was in trouble, and whether they would or could come for her remained to be seen. Tanya left, taking the food and water with her. The door slammed shut, plunging Rosemary back into darkness. She explored the cell by touch, mapping its dimensions. 10 feet by 10 feet, stone walls, stone floor, no windows. The door was solid metal with a small slot at the bottom for food delivery, no obvious weaknesses. But there was a ventilation grate near the ceiling, too small for a person to fit through, but large enough for sound to carry. Rosemary dragged the cell's single bench beneath the grate and climbed up. She could hear muffled voices from somewhere above. The detention cells were directly beneath the main administrative offices. She listened, straining to catch fragments of conversation. "Can't simply execute her without cause." An older male voice, authoritative. "She assaulted Beta Blake. She was caught red-handed in the archives. What more cause do you need?" Ricky Mason's voice, smooth and confident. "The optics are bad. She's an Omega with no history of violence or disloyalty. The pack will question. The pack will accept what I tell them." Ricky Mason's tone hardened. "Or they can join her in the cells." A pause. Then the older voice again. "What about the documents she found?" "Return to their proper files. The birth certificate was corrected. There's no evidence of any twin, no record of Reginald Mason beyond the official death certificate. As far as pack history is concerned, he never existed." Rosemary's heart sank. They'd destroyed the evidence, or altered it beyond recognition. "And the girl?" Another voice, female, Helga. "Confess to being a spy for a rival pack, she'll be executed as a traitor. Refuse to confess, she'll be executed for assault and attempted theft of classified documents. Either way, the problem is resolved." "She won't confess," Helga said. "The girl is stubborn." "Like her father." "Then we'll have to be persuasive." Ricky Mason's voice carried a smile that Rosemary could hear even through the ventilation system. "I'll question her personally tomorrow, after she's spent a night contemplating her mortality. Fear is an excellent motivator." The voices faded as the speakers moved away. Rosemary climbed down from the bench, her legs shaking. They were going to torture her, then they were going to kill her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. She curled up on the cold floor, exhaustion finally overwhelming fear. Her last thought before darkness claimed her was of 7 warriors in her basement, trusting her to return. "I'm sorry. I tried." She woke to the sound of the door opening, but this time the light that spilled in was different. Not the harsh overhead bulbs, but the soft glow of a flashlight. "Up, now. We don't have much time." Rosemary blinked, disoriented. The figure in the doorway was unfamiliar. A young man, maybe 20, with nervous eyes and hands that shook as he beckoned her forward. "Who—" "Questions later. Move." He grabbed her arm and pulled her into the corridor. The detention level was empty. No guards, no witnesses, just endless stone corridors and locked doors. "Where are the guards?" Rosemary whispered. "Coffee break. They think you're secured for the night." The young man moved quickly, leading her through a maze of passages. "I'm Vince Shields. I work maintenance here, and I owe your father a debt I can never repay." My father? He saved my little sister from drowning when I was too weak to help. Gave her CPR. Stayed with us at the hospital all night. Vince's voice cracked. He was a good man, better than most ranked wolves. When I heard what they were planning to do to you... He stopped at a service door marked Utilities, Authorized Personnel Only. This leads to the old tunnels under headquarters. They connect to the storm drains that empty into the forest. You can escape, but you have to go now. They'll discover you're missing within the hour. Rosemary stared at him. Why are you helping me? If they find out, then I'll deal with it. Vince pressed something into her hand, her emergency communicator. I grabbed this from the evidence locker. Your phone is gone, but at least you can call for help with this. Tears burned Rosemary's eyes. Thank you. Thank your father. He taught me that rank doesn't determine worth. That sometimes the strongest thing you can do is help someone weaker than you, even when it costs you everything. Vince opened the door, revealing a dark tunnel that smelled of damp earth and old stone. Go, and tell the truth about what they did to him. Tell everyone. Rosemary squeezed his hand once, then plunged into the darkness. The tunnel was narrow, claustrophobic, and pitch black. She felt her way along the rough walls, moving as quickly as she dared. Behind her, she heard shouts. They'd discovered her absence faster than Vince had predicted. She ran. The tunnel branched and branched again. She took turns at random, praying she was heading away from headquarters and not deeper into its bowels. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she didn't stop. Finally, she saw it. A circle of gray light ahead. The storm drain exit. Rosemary burst out into the forest, gasping for air. Snow lay thick on the ground, and the temperature had dropped below freezing. She was wearing only the light clothes she'd put on that morning, and already she could feel the cold seeping into her bones. But she was alive, free. She pulled out the communicator and pressed the emergency button. Once, twice, 3 times. I'm coming home. I'm alive. Please be there. Then she started walking, 3 miles through snow and forest, in inadequate clothing, with no supplies. The same journey that had nearly killed 7 elite warriors. But Rosemary Love had learned something in that cell. She'd learned that invisible didn't mean powerless, that Omega didn't mean worthless, that sometimes the smallest wolves carried the most important truths. She would make it home. She would tell Lucas and the others what she'd learned. She would find Reginald Mason, expose Ricky Mason's fraud, and make sure her father's death meant something, or she would die trying. Either way, she would never be invisible again. Chapter 8. The Omega's Fire. The forest tried to kill her. Every step was agony. The snow reached her knees in places, and her inadequate shoes filled with ice water within minutes. Her fingers went numb, then her toes, then her ears. The cold became a living thing, wrapping around her chest and squeezing until each breath felt like swallowing razors. But Rosemary kept moving. She'd survived 6 years with Helga. She'd survived Tanya's cruelty. She'd survived a night in a detention cell knowing she'd face torture and execution. She could survive 3 miles, 1 foot in front of the other. Count your steps. Focus on the number. 100 steps, 200, 500. Her legs gave out at step 843. Rosemary collapsed in the snow, her body simply refusing to continue. The cold didn't feel so bad anymore. Actually, it felt almost warm, comfortable, like sinking into a soft bed after a long day. She knew what that meant. Hypothermia, the same thing that had nearly killed Lucas and the others. "Get up!" her wolf snarled inside her mind. "Get up, or we die here like prey." "Can't," Rosemary whispered. "Then shift. Let me carry us home." Shifting took energy her body didn't have. It required a stable core temperature that she'd lost somewhere around step 600. But her wolf was right. Staying here meant death. Rosemary closed her eyes and reached for the shift. Pain exploded through her body as bones realigned, as muscles tore and reformed, as fur erupted across her skin. The transformation was supposed to be smooth, natural. This was butchery. Her body screamed in protest, fighting the change even as her wolf forced it through. When it ended, Rosemarie lay panting in the snow, her small omega wolf form shaking violently. But she was warmer. The fur helped. The forelegs helped. She ran. Her wolf form was faster, more agile in the snow. She leaped over fallen logs and dodged around trees, following the scent markers she'd memorized on the drive to headquarters that morning. The lodge was north and east, 3 miles through terrain that would kill a human, but was merely challenging for a wolf. She made it 2 miles before the searchers found her. The howl split the night, a hunting call, answered by 6 voices. They'd sent wolves after her. Professional trackers who knew these mountains better than she ever would. Rosemarie pushed harder, her small legs churning through the snow, but she was exhausted, frozen, and fundamentally weaker than the beta and alpha wolves pursuing her. They were gaining. A massive gray wolf burst from the trees to her left, cutting off her path. Rosemarie skidded to a halt, snow spraying. The gray wolf's lips pulled back, revealing teeth designed to tear through flesh and bone. She recognized him, one of Ricky Mason's personal guards, a wolf who'd killed rogues and traitors without hesitation. He lunged. Rosemarie dove right, his jaws snapping closed on empty air where her throat had been a heartbeat before. She scrambled up a snow-covered slope, her claws scrabbling for purchase. 2 more wolves appeared at the top of the slope. She was surrounded. The gray wolf stalked toward her, confident now that his prey was trapped. Rosemarie backed against a boulder, her mind racing. Eyes, throat, groin. Make them hurt and run. But she was in wolf form. No knives, no pepper spray, no human weapons, just teeth and claws and the fighting instincts of an omega who'd never been taught to fight. The gray wolf pounced. Rosemarie met him midair, going for his exposed throat the way Trevor had taught her. Not with strength, but with precision. Her teeth sank into the vulnerable spot where jaw met neck, not deep enough to kill, but deep enough to hurt. The gray wolf yelped and twisted away, blood streaming from the wound. The other 2 wolves hesitated, surprised that the omega had fought back at all. Rosemarie didn't wait for them to recover. She ran, shooting between them before they could block her path. Behind her, angry howls split the night. The chase was on again. She could see the lodge now, lights glowing in the distance. 1/2 mile. 1/4 mile. So close. The gray wolf hit her from behind like a freight train. They tumbled together down a slope, a chaos of fur and teeth and claws. Rosemarie felt ribs crack, felt warm blood soak into her fur, hers or his, she couldn't tell. They crashed to a stop at the bottom of the ravine, and the gray wolf's jaws closed around her back leg. Bone snapped. Rosemarie screamed, the sound emerging as a broken howl. This was it. She'd almost made it home, almost warned Lucas and the others, almost made her father's death mean something, almost wasn't enough. The gray wolf dragged her backward through the snow, away from the lodge, back toward headquarters and execution. The other tracker wolves appeared at the top of the ravine, watching their packmates secure the escaped prisoner. Then the night exploded with violence. 7 wolves burst from the trees like vengeful spirits, not omega, not even beta. These were warriors, and they moved with lethal precision that spoke of years of training and absolute fury. Lucas, his black wolf form massive and terrifying, hit the gray wolf so hard that teeth flew. The gray wolf released Rosemarie's broken leg and tried to fight back, but he was outmatched. Within seconds, Lucas had him pinned, jaws around his throat, one wrong move from death. The other 6 wolves engaged the remaining trackers. It was brutal and efficient. Neil's scarred face twisted in rage as he systematically dismantled one opponent. Dave's russet form protected Rosemarie even as he fought. Tony, Blake, Virgil, and Trevor worked in perfect synchronization, the product of hundreds of hours training together. The fight lasted less than 3 minutes. The tracker wolves fled, leaving their leader still pinned beneath Lucas's massive form. Lucas leaned close to the gray wolf's ear and growled something too low for Rosemarie to hear. Whatever it was made the gray wolf's eyes go wide with fear. Then Lucas released him and let him run, limping and bleeding, back toward headquarters. The 7 warriors shifted back to human form, their bodies steaming in the cold air. Someone, Virgil, had brought clothes in a waterproof pack, and they dressed quickly. Lucas knelt beside Rosemary's wolf form. "It's okay. You're safe now. Can you shift back?" She tried. Her body refused, too traumatized and exhausted to manage the transformation. "Her leg's broken," Dave said, examining the injury with gentle hands. "And she's hypothermic. We need to get her inside and warm now." Lucas simply scooped her up, cradling her wolf form against his chest. "Let's move. They'll send reinforcements once that tracker reports back." They ran through the forest, these 7 fugitive warriors carrying their wounded Omega like she was precious cargo. Rosemary's consciousness flickered in and out, her mind struggling to process what had happened. They'd come for her, 7 men who were supposed to stay hidden, who were supposed to protect themselves above all else. They'd risked everything to save one Omega they'd known for less than a week. The lodge appeared through the trees. They burst through the door, and suddenly there was warmth and light and blessed safety. Dave took over, his field medic training evident in every efficient movement. "I need to set the leg before she shifts back, or it'll heal wrong. Someone get blankets, warm water, and the medical kit." Lucas laid Rosemary on the couch before the roaring fire. His hand stroked between her ears, a gesture so gentle it made her wolf whimper. "You did it," he murmured. "You got into the archives. You found something. I know you did." She wished she could speak, could tell them everything she'd learned, but her wolf form couldn't form words, and her body was shutting down from shock and cold. "Set the leg," Lucas ordered. "Do whatever you need to do. Just save her." Dave worked quickly, his hands sure despite the complexity of setting a bone on a wolf. Rosemary howled once when the bone shifted back into alignment, then mercifully, darkness claimed her. She woke human, warm, and in her own bed. For a moment, she thought it had all been a fever dream, the archives, the cell, the escape, the fight. But then she tried to move her leg and agony shot through her, confirming the reality of her situation. Easy. Lucas appeared beside the bed, pressing her gently back against the pillows. Dave set the bone and splinted it, but you need to stay still for at least 48 hours while it heals. "They know," Rosemary croaked, her throat raw from screaming. "They know I was in the archives. They've altered the documents. They're planning to execute me." "Slow down." Lucas held a glass of water to her lips. "Start from the beginning." She told them everything, finding the birth certificate, the hospital records showing 2 healthy twins, the notation about infant B being transferred to alternative care, Tanya catching her, the cell, the conversation she'd overheard about destroying evidence and making her confess. When she finished, the 7 men sat in grim silence. "They confirmed your father was murdered," Virgil said finally. "That's something." "Something that dies with me if Ricky Mason gets his way," Rosemary countered. "I failed. I got the evidence, but they destroyed it. We're back where we started." "Not quite." Virgil pulled out a laptop. "While you were unconscious, I did some digging. That notation you mentioned. Infant B transferred to alternative care per parental request. Documents sealed by court order. That's legal language for a closed adoption. Which means there's a court record somewhere," Trevor said, catching on. "Exactly. Adoption records are sealed, but they're not destroyed. They exist in a separate legal database maintained by the Regional Shifter Council, not the individual packs." Virgil's fingers flew across the keyboard. "If we can access that database, we can find out who adopted Reginald Mason," Rosemary finished. "There's another problem," Neil said from his position by the window. "That tracker Lucas let go, he's going to report everything. By morning, Ricky Mason will know that Rosemary has help. 7 wolves who fight like elite warriors. He's going to figure out we're alive." "Good," Lucas said flatly. "Let him know. Let him understand that if he wants to kill Rosemary, he'll have to go through all 7 of us first." "That's a suicide pact," Blake pointed out. "That's loyalty," Dave corrected. She risked everything for us. We return the favor. Tony, who'd been silent throughout, finally spoke. We need to find Reginald Mason before Ricky Mason finds us. That's the only way any of us survive this. How long to crack the adoption database? Lucas asked Virgil. 48 hours, maybe less if I can bypass their security protocols. Virgil's expression was grim. But we're working against the clock. Every hour we stay here increases the risk. Then we work fast. Lucas turned back to Rosemarie. You need to rest and heal. Let us handle the next phase. No. Rosemarie struggled to sit up despite the pain in her leg. I'm part of this now. You don't get to sideline me just because I'm injured. You can barely walk, Neil said. I can still think. I can still plan. Rosemarie met each of their eyes in turn. And I know things about this pack that you don't. I know where secrets are kept, who can be trusted, who owes my father debts. Like Vince Shields, Lucas said, the maintenance worker who helped you escape. Like Vince, Rosemarie confirmed, and there are others. Omegas and low-ranked wolves who've been invisible so long that the powerful forget we exist. We see things, we hear things, and some of us, when pushed hard enough, are willing to fight back. A slow smile crossed Lucas's face. You want to build a network. Use the invisible wolves to gather intelligence. I want to show Ricky Mason that Omega doesn't mean powerless, Rosemarie said. He's spent years crushing anyone who questions his authority. It's time someone crushed back. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Outside, snow had begun falling again, soft and quiet, covering the evidence of the night's violence. Tomorrow, Lucas said finally, we start planning a revolution, not with violence or direct confrontation, but with truth. We find Reginald Mason. We expose Ricky Mason's lies, and we use every invisible wolf in this pack to do it. They'll call it treason, Tanya said. They'll call it justice, Rosemarie corrected. And they'll be right. As the others dispersed to rest and plan, Lucas remained beside her bed. He took her hand carefully, mindful of her injuries. You terrified me tonight, he said quietly. When that emergency signal came through, when we realized you'd been caught, I've never moved so fast in my life. None of us have. You were supposed to stay hidden, Rosemarie said. You were supposed to protect yourselves. Some things are more important than survival, Lucas said. Like making sure the bravest wolf we've ever met doesn't die alone in the snow. Rosemarie's throat tightened. I'm not brave. I'm terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite the fear. Lucas squeezed her hand gently. You held a knife to a beta's throat. You accused an alpha of fraud to his face. You escaped from a detention cell and made it 3 miles through a blizzard with a broken leg. That's not just brave, Rosemarie. That's extraordinary. She looked at him, this powerful warrior who'd chosen to risk everything for an Omega he barely knew. Why? She whispered. Why do you care what happens to me? Lucas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because when you opened that door and saved 7 dying wolves, you didn't ask what we could offer you in return. You didn't calculate the risk versus reward. You just saw people in need and helped. That's rare, Rosemarie, especially in a world where everyone's taught that strength and power are the only things that matter. He stood, releasing her hand. Rest now. Tomorrow, we change everything. As he left, Rosemarie lay in the darkness, listening to the soft sounds of 7 warriors preparing for war in her father's lodge. She'd set out to find the truth about her father's death. Instead, she'd found something more dangerous and more precious, a purpose worth fighting for, and people willing to fight beside her. The storm had brought 7 frozen wolves to her door, but what it had really brought was revolution, and the invisible Omega who'd spent 6 years being overlooked was about to become the most dangerous wolf in the Silver Pine Pack. Chapter 9. The Hidden Alpha. The mandatory pack meeting was scheduled for 6 o'clock that evening. By noon, Rosemarie could hear the increased activity on the mountain road. vehicles passing by the lodge as pack members made their way to headquarters. She sat by the window, her splinted leg propped on a cushion, watching the procession with growing dread. Helga and Tanya would be there. Ricky Mason would be there. And they would all be expecting her to attend. "You're not going," Lucas said firmly. He'd been hovering since she'd woken, alternating between protective and paranoid. "I have to." Rosemarie kept her gaze on the road. "If I don't show up, they'll send wolves to drag me there. Or worse, they'll come here and find all of you. Your leg is broken. You have a legitimate excuse." "Helga doesn't accept excuses." Rosemarie turned to face him. "Trust me, if I'm not there, she'll make it her personal mission to retrieve me, and 7 fugitive warriors hiding in my basement won't survive that kind of scrutiny." Virgil looked up from his laptop, dark circles under his eyes from a night of hacking. "She's right. Her absence would draw more attention than her presence." "Then we go with her," Dave said. He'd been reviewing medical supplies, preparing for every possible emergency. "Stay close, stay hidden, but be ready to extract her if things go wrong." 7 elite warriors sneaking into pack headquarters during a mandatory meeting? Blake shook his head. "That's insane." "So is letting her walk in there alone," Neil countered. They argued for another hour, voices rising and falling as they debated tactics and risks. Finally, Trevor proposed a compromise. 3 of us go. Lucas, because he's the best fighter. Dave, because he can pass as a regular pack member if spotted. And me, because I know every entrance and exit at headquarters. He looked at Rosemarie. "We stay in wolf form, use the forest as cover, and monitor the meeting from outside. First sign of trouble, we extract you. No arguments." "That still leaves 4 of us here," Tony pointed out. "Someone needs to guard the lodge," Virgil said, "and continue working on cracking the adoption database. I'm close. Another few hours and I'll have the information we need." The plan was settled. At 4:30 they began preparations. Dave helped Rosemarie into clothing suitable for a pack meeting: dark slacks, a modest sweater, boots that accommodated the splint on her leg. He'd fashioned a walking stick from a sturdy branch, carved and smoothed until it could support her weight. "Remember the breathing exercises," Tony said as they prepared to leave. "Control your fear scent. Keep your heart rate steady." "And if Ricky Mason tries to detain you again," Neil added, pressing the modified pepper spray into her hand, "use this and run. We'll find you." Lucas shifted to his massive black wolf form and waited by the door. Dave and Trevor followed suit, their wolves smaller than Lucas's, but no less dangerous. Rosemarie limped to her car, her broken legs screaming protest with each step. The 3 wolves melted into the forest, shadows among shadows, invisible to anyone not specifically looking for them. The drive to headquarters felt like a funeral procession. The parking lot was packed. Every pack member who could attend had shown up, drawn by curiosity about the mandatory nature of the meeting. Rosemarie spotted Helga's luxury SUV in the reserve section, Tanya's sports car beside it. She parked in the far corner and sat for a moment, gathering courage. "You can do this. You've survived worse. Just a few hours. Answer questions. Look harmless. Get out." The walk from the parking lot to the main entrance took forever. Her splinted leg attracted stares and whispered comments, but no one approached her. Omegas existed in a strange social limbo, noticed when convenient, invisible when not. The main assembly hall was on the first floor, a massive space with tiered seating that could accommodate 300 wolves. It was already half full. And the noise was deafening: conversations, laughter, the rustle of bodies finding seats. Rosemarie slipped into the back row, as far from the stage as possible. From here, she could see the emergency exits, count the security guards, and monitor who came and went. Helga appeared in the side entrance, resplendent in designer clothing that probably cost more than Rosemarie's car. Tanya walked beside her, equally polished, equally perfect. They didn't scan the crowd. Why would they? And Omega's presence or absence was beneath their notice. At exactly 6 o'clock, Alpha Ricky Mason took the stage. He was everything an alpha should be: tall, powerful, commanding. His golden hair caught the lights, making him seem to glow. When he smiled, the room settled into attentive silence. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice carrying easily through the space. "I know mandatory meetings are disruptive, but recent events have made this gathering necessary." Rosemary's pulse quickened. 3 nights ago, Ricky Mason continued, 7 members of my elite guard were sent to investigate reports of rogue activity at our eastern border. They did not return. A ripple of shock moved through the assembly. Wolves turned to their neighbors, whispering urgently. Search parties have been deployed, but the storm made recovery efforts difficult. As of this morning, we must assume that all 7 guards perished in the blizzard while serving their pack. His expression was perfectly calibrated. Grief, respect, determination. They were warriors of the highest caliber, and they will be honored as heroes. Lies. All lies delivered with such confidence that most of the pack would never question them. However, Ricky Mason's tone hardened. In the course of investigating their disappearance, we uncovered evidence of a more disturbing nature. It appears that someone within our pack has been working to undermine Alpha authority. Someone has been accessing classified records, spreading false information, and attempting to sow discord. His gaze swept the crowd, and for just a moment, Rosemary could have sworn he looked directly at her. This traitor will be found, and when they are, they will face the full weight of pack justice. He paused for effect. But I am not a cruel Alpha. I believe in mercy, even for those who have betrayed their pack. If the individual responsible comes forward voluntarily, confesses their crimes, and reveals who they've been working with, I will show leniency. The room was silent now, everyone processing this revelation. A traitor in the pack, someone undermining the Alpha. It was the kind of scandal that could tear a community apart. "You have 48 hours, Ricky Mason said. After that, when we identify you, and we will identify you, there will be no mercy, only justice." He stepped back from the podium, and suddenly Helga was standing, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "Alpha, if I may?" "Of course, Council Member Helga." Helga moved to the front of the room, her expression grieving. "I must share something that brings me great shame, something I hoped never to reveal." Rosemary's stomach dropped. "My stepdaughter, Rosemary Love, has been behaving erratically since her father's death 6 years ago. I've tried to help her, tried to guide her toward a productive life within our pack." Helga's voice cracked with false emotion. "But I'm afraid the trauma of losing her father has damaged her beyond my ability to repair. No, 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 no." Yesterday, Rosemary was caught in the pack archives, photographing classified documents related to the Alpha bloodline. When confronted, she became violent, threatened pack security with a weapon, and made wild accusations about Alpha Ricky Mason's legitimacy. The crowd erupted. Wolves turned to stare at Rosemary, their expressions ranging from shock to disgust to fear. "I helped her escape the detention cells," Helga continued, her performance flawless. "Not because I condone her actions, but because I hoped family intervention might succeed where official channels had failed. I brought her home, spoke with her, tried to make her understand the severity of her crimes." Another lie. But who would believe an Omega over a council member? "This morning she fled. I believe she's in hiding somewhere in our territory, possibly with collaborators who have been using her mental instability for their own purposes." Helga turned to face the crowd directly. "If anyone has seen Rosemary, if anyone knows where she might be, please come forward. She needs help, not punishment. Medical help, psychological support. We owe that much to her father's memory." The brilliant trap clicked shut. Rosemary couldn't speak without confirming her presence. She couldn't defend herself without admitting she'd been in the archives. And Helga had transformed her from a criminal into a mentally unstable Omega who needed to be captured for her own good. "Does anyone have information about Rosemary's whereabouts?" Ricky Mason asked, scanning the crowd. Rosemary held her breath. One word, one gesture, one person pointing to the back row, and it was over. Then a hand raised near the front. Vince Shields stood, his young face nervous but determined. "Alpha, I saw her yesterday morning. She was at the eastern edge of the territory, near the old mining caves. She seemed confused, disoriented. I tried to talk to her, but she ran." The lie was so smooth, so believable, that even Rosemarie almost believed it. Vince was sending search parties in the wrong direction, buying her time. "Thank you, Vince." Ricky Mason nodded approvingly. "We'll send wolves to search that area immediately." Other hands started to rise, other pack members offering sightings of the unstable Omega. Each report sent searchers in a different direction, all of them wrong. The invisible wolves of the pack were rising up, protecting one of their own in the only way they could, with misdirection and careful lies. Rosemarie felt tears prick her eyes. She wasn't alone after all. The meeting continued for another hour, covering pack business and territory matters that Rosemarie barely heard. She kept her head down, her breathing controlled, her fear scent masked by the breathing techniques Tony had taught her. Finally, mercifully, Ricky Mason dismissed them. Rosemarie waited until half the crowd had left before attempting to stand. Her broken leg had stiffened during the meeting, and the pain when she put weight on it nearly made her cry out, "Here, let me help!" Rosemarie looked up to find a middle-aged Omega woman she vaguely recognized from past pack functions. The woman offered her arm, her expression kind. "Stairs are hard with an injury," the woman said quietly. "I'm Deborah Roberts. Your father helped my son get a scholarship when no one else would. Let me return the favor." Together, they made their way through the thinning crowd. No one paid them attention. Just two Omegas, invisible and irrelevant. Deborah helped her to the parking lot, making small talk about the weather and pack gossip that covered their real conversation. "There are more of us than you think," Deborah murmured as they reached Rosemarie's car. "Wolves who remember your father. Wolves who are tired of being treated like we don't matter. When you're ready to fight back, you won't be alone." "How do I reach you?" Rosemarie asked. "You don't. We'll reach you." Deborah squeezed her hand once, then walked away, disappearing into the crowd of departing pack members. Rosemarie sat in her car, trembling. She'd survived. She'd sat in the same room as the wolves who wanted her dead, and she'd survived. The passenger door opened, and Dave slid in, still pulling on a shirt. "Drive, now. We need to get you out of here before someone realizes Vince's story was garbage." Rosemarie drove, her hands shaking on the wheel. In the rearview mirror, she saw two more wolves emerge from the forest and shift. Lucas and Trevor, guarding their retreat. "Did you hear?" she asked Dave. "Every word. They're good, I'll give them that. Painting you as mentally ill instead of a criminal makes you easier to capture and harder to defend." Dave kept his eyes on the road behind them, watching for pursuit. "But they made a mistake." "What mistake?" "They gave us 48 hours, and Virgil just texted. He cracked the adoption database." Rosemarie's breath caught. "He found Reginald Mason?" "He found where Reginald Mason was sent after birth, an Omega couple living on the western edge of Silver Pine Territory, a family named Morrison who couldn't have children of their own." Dave's expression was grim. "They changed his name, raised him as their own, and when he was 10 years old, both his adoptive parents died in a fire that the pack ruled accidental." "Let me guess," Rosemarie said. "The fire happened right around the time Alpha Gregory and Luna Clara died in that convenient rogue attack." 3 weeks after. The child went into the pack's foster system, bounced around a few homes, and eventually aged out at 18. No one tracked him after that. So he could be anywhere. He might not even know he's Alpha-born. "Or," Dave said slowly, "he might know exactly who he is and has been hiding all these years, waiting for someone to find him." They pulled into the lodge's driveway. Lucas and Trevor were already there, having taken a faster route through the forest. The moment Rosemarie entered, Virgil thrust a printed document into her hands. Harold Morrison and Deborah Morrison, adoptive parents to the child they named Luke Morrison. Birth date matches Reginald Mason's. Blood type matches. "And look at this." He pointed to a photograph attached to the file. 2 Omega parents holding a baby with distinctive blue eyes and dark hair. Rosemary stared at the photo, her mind racing. Luke Morrison. He'd be 28 now. Has anyone searched for him? I've been trying, but the trail goes cold after he turned 18. It's like he vanished. Virgil pulled up more screens. No tax records, no employment history, no property ownership. Either he's dead or he's very good at staying hidden. Or someone has been hunting him his entire life and he's learned to be invisible, Lucas said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Think about it. His biological parents die suspiciously. His adoptive parents die suspiciously. He goes into foster care and somehow survives to adulthood. That takes more than luck. That takes training, Neil agreed. Someone taught him to hide. Or he taught himself, Rosemary said, pieces clicking together. An Omega child, lost in the foster system, learning that survival means being overlooked, learning that the safest place is where no one thinks to look. Among other Omegas, Dave said, hidden in plain sight. The room went silent as the implications sank in. Luke Morrison, Rosemary whispered. An Omega-raised alpha who spent 28 years being invisible. He could be anywhere. He could be anyone. Or, Virgil said, pulling up one final screen, he could be the maintenance worker who risked his life to help you escape yesterday. On the screen was a grainy employee ID photo from PAC headquarters. Vince Shields, age 28, job title, maintenance supervisor. Emergency contact, none. Next of kin, deceased. But it wasn't Vince's face in the photo. The name was wrong, the details were altered, but the face was identical to the baby in Harold and Deborah Morrison's adoption photo. The same distinctive blue eyes, the same bone structure that would mature into something commanding, powerful, alpha. Vince Shields is Luke Morrison, Rosemary breathed. Vince Shields is Reginald Mason. The true alpha of the Silverpine Pack, Lucas finished, has been hiding in PAC headquarters as a maintenance worker for the last 5 years. And suddenly, everything made terrible, perfect sense. Chapter 10. The Omega's Revolution. The revelation hung in the air like electricity before a lightning strike. We need to bring him here, Dave said immediately, before Ricky Mason figures out who Vince really is. It might be too late for that, Virgil countered, typing furiously. If I could trace the connection between Vince Shields and Luke Morrison, Ricky Mason's people can too, especially now that they're actively hunting for Rosemary's collaborators. Rosemary's mind raced. Vince had helped her escape. He'd stood up in that meeting and deliberately sent search parties in the wrong direction. He'd risked everything to protect her, because he knew. He'd always known. He saved my life, she said quietly. Not just yesterday, years ago, when my father was still alive. Vince's little sister. That story he told me about drowning. That was real. My father pulled her from the river and stayed with them at the hospital. Which means your father knew, Lucas said. Harold Love knew that Vince Shields was actually Reginald Mason. The pieces fell into place with devastating clarity. Her father had opposed Ricky Mason's consolidation of power because he'd known the Alpha was a fraud. He'd died not from random rogue violence, but because he'd been protecting the true heir. And Vince, Luke, Reginald, had spent years afterward trying to repay that debt by staying alive, staying hidden, waiting for someone brave enough or foolish enough to expose the truth. I have to go back, Rosemary said. Absolutely not, Lucas and Dave said in unison. They're hunting for me. The entire pack is on alert. Walking into headquarters now is suicide, Neil added. Which is exactly why I have to do it. Rosemary stood, testing her broken leg. The pain was manageable now, the bone already beginning to knit thanks to shifter healing. Ricky Mason is expecting me to hide. He's expecting collaborators to protect me. He's not expecting me to walk in through the front door and challenge him directly. Because that's insane, Blake said flatly. No, Virgil said slowly, understanding dawning in his dark eyes. It's brilliant. The mandatory meeting is over. Most PAC members have returned home. Security will be lighter now than it will be for the next 48 hours. And Vince works night shift, Rosemary continued. He'll be there, probably in the maintenance tunnels where no one thinks to look. I can reach him, tell him what we know. and get him out before Ricky Mason makes the connection. With a broken leg and half the pack hunting you, Trevor pointed out. With 7 elite warriors backing me up, Rosemary countered. You said it yourself. You won't let me die alone, so don't. Come with me, all of you. We end this tonight. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. What she was proposing wasn't just rescue. It was open rebellion. 7 fugitive warriors and 1 Omega storming pack headquarters to extract the true Alpha and expose the fraud who'd stolen his birthright. It was suicide. It was also the only way any of them survived. If we do this, Lucas said carefully, there's no going back. We're committing to war with Ricky Mason and everyone loyal to him. We committed to war the moment we survived that blizzard, Dave said. The moment Rosemary opened her door, we've just been delaying the inevitable. Tony spoke up, his quiet voice cutting through the tension. The question isn't whether we fight. It's whether we fight smart or fight stupid. Going in without a plan is stupid. Then we make a plan, Rosemary said. We have, she checked the clock, 4 hours until Vince's shift starts at midnight, 4 hours to prepare for the most important operation of our lives. They gathered around the dining table, spreading out building schematics that Virgil pulled from his hacked files. The plan came together piece by piece, each warrior contributing their expertise. Neil would create a diversion at the northern entrance. Nothing violent, just enough commotion to draw security attention. Blake and Tony would disable the security cameras and communication systems from the outside, cutting pack headquarters off from reinforcements. Dave and Trevor would secure escape routes and position vehicles for rapid extraction. Virgil would remain at the lodge, monitoring communications and ready to deploy emergency countermeasures if things went wrong. Which left Lucas and Rosemary to infiltrate the building, find Vince, and get him out. This is insane, Blake muttered for the 3rd time as they finalized details. This is revolution, Lucas corrected, and revolutions are always insane right up until they succeed. At 11:30, they moved out. Rosemary wore dark clothing that blended with shadows, her splinted leg hidden beneath loose pants. The pain was constant now, a dull throb that sharpened with each step, but she'd learned to work through it. Lucas had given her a dose of painkillers strong enough to dull the worst of it without clouding her judgment. They approached pack headquarters from multiple directions, shadows in the darkness. The building was lit but quiet, most of the administrative staff gone for the night. Only essential personnel remained, security guards, night shift maintenance, a skeleton crew of wolves who'd drawn the short straw. Neil's diversion went off perfectly. A fire alarm in the northern wing, followed by reports of a break-in at one of the storage facilities. Not enough to trigger a full emergency response, but enough to pull security away from the main building. Blake and Tony made short work of the camera systems. Virgil had provided them with specialized equipment that created a loop in the footage. Anyone watching the monitors would see empty hallways and quiet rooms while the real infiltration happened unseen. Rosemary and Lucas entered through the utility access door that Vince had shown her during her escape. The tunnels beneath headquarters were dark, damp, and smelled of old stone and mechanical systems. Maintenance supervisor would have access to all the utility areas, Lucas whispered. If he's smart, he's using this network to move around the building undetected. They navigated by the light of a small flashlight, following pipes and electrical conduits deeper into the building's substructure. Rosemary's broken leg screamed protest with each step down the metal stairs, but she gritted her teeth and kept moving. A sound ahead. Footsteps. Someone whistling softly. They pressed against the wall as a figure rounded the corner. Young, familiar, carrying a toolbox and wearing maintenance coveralls. Vince Shields stopped when he saw them, his hand moving towards something in his pocket. "Wait," Rosemary said quickly. "Vince, it's me. Rosemary, I need to talk to you." His hand paused. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by wariness. "You shouldn't be here. They're hunting you." "I know." She stepped forward, Lucas a protective shadow behind her. "I also know who you are."
who you really are. Vince's entire body went rigid. I don't know what you're... Luke Morrison, son of Harold and Deborah Morrison.
Adopted from the Silver Pine Pack foster system after your birth parents, Alpha Gregory Mason and Luna Clara Mason, gave you away to protect you from their alpha-born firstborn son who they already knew was dangerous. The color drained from Vince's face. Your adoptive parents died when you were 10, Rosemary continued gently. The same month your biological parents were killed in a rogue attack that wasn't actually an attack. You've spent 18 years hiding in plain sight, surviving by being invisible, waiting for someone to figure out the truth. My name is Vince Shields, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Your name is Reginald Mason, Lucas said. You're the true alpha of the Silver Pine Pack, and we have proof. Vince, Reginald, stared at them for a long moment. Then slowly, he set down his toolbox and sank against the tunnel wall. I knew someone would figure it out eventually, he said quietly. I just didn't think it would be Harold Love's daughter and 7 warriors who were supposed to be dead. You knew about us? Lucas asked sharply. I maintain this building. I have access to everything, including the detention cells where they held Rosemary, including the security footage they thought was erased, showing 7 wolves fighting tracker wolves to rescue her. A faint smile touched his lips. I told you, being invisible has advantages. People forget that maintenance workers see and hear everything. Then you know Ricky Mason is planning to kill all of us, Rosemary said. I know. Reginald stood, squaring his shoulders. For the first time, Rosemary saw past the submissive maintenance worker facade to the man underneath, the alpha he'd always been, buried under layers of protective camouflage. I've known for years what my brother is capable of, what he's done, the wolves he's killed to maintain his stolen position. Then help us stop him, Lucas said. Come with us. We have evidence of the adoption, proof that you're the legitimate heir. We can challenge his authority, force the Council of Alphas to investigate. No, Reginald's voice was firm. A legal challenge would take months, maybe years. How many more wolves does Ricky kill while we wait for bureaucrats to decide who has the right bloodline? How many more Omegas does he crush? How many more families does he destroy? Then what do you propose? Lucas asked. Reginald's blue eyes, those distinctive alpha eyes that marked him as Gregory Mason's son, blazed with sudden fire. I propose we do this the old way, the way our ancestors did before councils and politics complicated everything. A direct challenge, Rosemary breathed. An alpha challenge, Reginald corrected. Combat to submission or death. Winner takes the pack. It's pack law, older than any council decree. And Ricky Mason can't refuse without admitting he's afraid of a maintenance worker. He'll kill you, Lucas said bluntly. You've been hiding for 18 years. He's been training as alpha. You're not ready for... I've been preparing for this my entire life. Reginald's voice held steel now, the submissive Omega act completely gone. Every odd job, every night shift, every moment I spent being invisible, I was watching him, learning his patterns, understanding his weaknesses. And I've been training too, just not where anyone could see. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing the kind of muscle definition that didn't come from casual exercise. Being Omega doesn't mean being weak. It means being underestimated. And sometimes, that's the greatest weapon of all. Rosemary felt hope bloom in her chest for the first time in days. When? Tomorrow night. The new moon. Reginald checked his watch. Traditional alpha challenges happen under the new moon. It's symbolic. Darkness before the dawn, death before rebirth. And it gives us 24 hours to prepare and spread the word. Spread the word, Lucas echoed. An alpha challenge requires witnesses. Pack members have to see it, acknowledge it, accept the results. Reginald's smile turned sharp. Which means we need to make sure every Omega, every low-ranked wolf, every invisible pack member knows to be at the challenge ground tomorrow night. The wolves Ricky Mason has spent years crushing need to see him fall. The invisible army, Rosemary murmured, remembering Deborah Roberts' words. When you're ready to fight back, you won't be alone. Exactly. Reginald pulled out his phone and began typing rapidly. I have contacts. Wolves who remember what this pack used to be before Ricky turned it into his personal dictatorship. By morning, every Omega and low-ranked wolf in Silverpine territory will know that the true alpha is challenging the false one. Ricky Mason will try to stop the challenge, Dave said, appearing from the tunnel entrance with Trevor. He'll claim it's illegal, unprecedented. It's neither, Trevor interrupted. I looked it up. Pack law explicitly allows alpha challenges from any wolf with legitimate bloodline claim. And with the evidence we have, which includes testimony from the elder Georgina Noble, Virgil's voice crackled over their communicators, who just sent me a video message confirming her vision about the false king and the hidden heir. She's willing to testify before the Council of Alphas if needed. Everything was falling into place. Not perfectly, not safely, but falling nonetheless. We have one night, Lucas said. One night to prepare Reginald for the fight of his life. One night to gather witnesses. One night to make sure that when the sun rises on the day after tomorrow, the Silverpine Pack has its rightful alpha. Or we all die trying, Blake added from the tunnel entrance. There are worse ways to die, Reginald said quietly, than fighting for truth. They emerged from the tunnels together. 8 wolves who shouldn't have stood a chance against the entrenched power structure. One true alpha who'd spent 18 years pretending to be invisible. 7 elite warriors who'd been sentenced to death for learning the truth. And 1 Omega who'd opened her door to strangers and started a revolution. The next 24 hours were a blur of preparation. Virgil sent encrypted messages to every contact they could verify, spreading word of the challenge. Rosemary reached out to Deborah Roberts and the other Omegas who'd protected her during the meeting. Within hours, a network of invisible wolves was mobilizing, passing information through channels the ranked wolves never monitored. Lucas and the others trained Reginald, preparing him for combat against an opponent who'd spent years honing alpha techniques. Reginald proved to be a quick study. Years of observation had taught him Ricky's fighting style, and his Omega-trained agility gave him advantages the larger alpha wouldn't expect. He's strong, but he's arrogant, Reginald explained as they drilled combinations. He's spent so long believing he's untouchable that he's forgotten to guard his weaknesses. Everyone has weaknesses, Dave said. Even alphas. Especially alphas, Rosemary corrected, watching from the sidelines where her broken leg kept her benched. Especially ones who've built their power on lies. As dawn broke, Virgil reported the response. Over 200 low-ranked pack members had confirmed they would witness the challenge. Omegas, low betas, wolves who'd spent years being overlooked and undervalued. They would form the audience, and their presence would make the challenge legally binding. Ricky Mason can't refuse now, Virgil said with satisfaction. Not without looking like a coward in front of half the pack. He'll bring his own supporters, Neil warned. Elite guards, loyal betas, wolves who benefit from his regime. Let him, Reginald said. His voice had changed over the last 24 hours, gaining depth and authority. The maintenance worker was gone, replaced by the alpha he'd always been beneath the disguise. Let him bring everyone. They all need to see what happens when truth confronts lies. As evening approached, they made their way to the traditional challenge ground, a clearing in the forest north of pack headquarters, marked by ancient stones that predated modern pack politics. It was neutral territory, sacred ground where pack law held absolute authority. They arrived to find the clearing already filling with wolves. Omegas stood in clusters, their faces nervous but determined. Low-ranked betas who'd suffered under Ricky's rule, young wolves who'd only known fear and oppression, and scattered among them, the ranked wolves, the ones who benefited from the current system, who'd come to see the challenge crushed and order restored. Helga arrived in her luxury SUV, Tanya beside her. They stared at Rosemary with expressions of shock and rage. "You're supposed to be in hiding," Helga hissed as she passed. "I was," Rosemary replied calmly. "I was hiding the truth, but it's time for truth to be seen." Ricky Mason arrived last, making an entrance befitting his stolen position. He was flanked by guards, dressed in formal alpha regalia, every inch the powerful leader. His eyes scanned the crowd and landed on Reginald, who stood at the center of the challenge circle wearing simple clothes that marked him as what he'd always pretended to be. Nobody important. "This is the challenger?" Ricky's voice dripped with contempt. "A maintenance worker? This is beneath me." "I am Reginald Mason," the young man said clearly, his voice carrying across the clearing, "son of Alpha Gregory Mason and Luna Clara Mason, twin brother to Ricky Mason, and by right of blood and pack law, I challenge you for leadership of the Silver Pine Pack." The clearing erupted in chaos, wolves shouting, arguing, demanding proof or explanation. Ricky Mason's face went through several expressions: shock, rage, calculation, before settling on cold fury. "You're supposed to be dead," he said quietly. "So are 7 elite warriors," Reginald replied. "But sometimes the wolves you try to kill refuse to die quietly." Lucas stepped forward, carrying the folder of documents they'd gathered. Birth certificates, hospital records, adoption papers, testimony from Elder Georgina Noble, all confirming that Reginald Mason survived his birth, was given to adoptive parents for protection, and has lived under assumed names for the past 28 years, while you built a regime on lies and murder. "Including the murder of Harold Love," Rosemary added, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. "My father, who opposed your consolidation of power because he knew you were a fraud." The crowd's chaos intensified, but above it all, one voice rang out clear and commanding. "Enough!" An elderly woman pushed through the crowd, Elder Georgina Noble herself, flanked by 2 other pack elders. "I have come to witness this challenge and verify the claims made. Present your evidence." What followed was a strange, formal proceeding. Documents examined, testimonies heard, Georgina Noble's vision recounted in detail. Through it all, Ricky Mason stood silent, his expression growing darker. Finally, Georgina spoke. "The evidence is compelling. Reginald Mason has legitimate claim to alpha status. The challenge is valid under pack law." "Then let's end this farce," Ricky snarled. He stripped off his formal jacket and stalked to the center of the circle. "I accept the challenge. Combat to submission or death. And when I'm done crushing this pretender, I'll deal with the rest of you traitors." Reginald moved to meet him, and the crowd fell silent. The fight began with Ricky's overwhelming assault. He was larger, stronger, trained in alpha combat techniques. His fists were hammers, his movements precise and brutal. Reginald gave ground, dodging and weaving, using his smaller size and Omega-trained agility to avoid the worst of the attacks. "Stand still and fight!" Ricky roared, frustration mounting as his opponent refused to engage directly. "Why?" Reginald asked, dancing away from another heavy blow. "You've spent 18 years pretending to be something you're not. I've spent 18 years actually being what I was born to be. I know who I am. Do you?" The words struck deeper than any physical blow. Ricky's attacks became wilder, sloppier, rage overcoming strategy. And that's when Reginald struck. He moved like water, flowing around Ricky's guard and landing a precise blow to the kidney. Then another to the solar plexus, a third to the knee that made the larger wolf stumble. "You killed my parents," Reginald said, his voice carrying across the silent clearing. "You killed Harold Love. You sent 7 loyal warriors to die in a blizzard. You've terrorized this pack for years. And for what? Power you were always too weak to earn legitimately?" Ricky lunged, and Reginald caught his arm, using the larger wolf's momentum to throw him to the ground. In seconds, he had Ricky pinned, his hand around his brother's throat. "Yield," Reginald commanded, his voice pure alpha now. "Yield and face justice, or die and face nothing at all." For a long moment, Ricky struggled. Then, seeing the death in his brother's eyes, he went limp. "I yield," he gasped. The clearing erupted in cheers from the Omegas and low-ranked wolves. Reginald stood, releasing his brother's throat, and faced the crowd. "I am Reginald Mason, rightful alpha of the Silver Pine Pack," he declared, "and my first act is to promise that no wolf in this pack will ever again be judged solely by their rank at birth. Omega, Beta, or Alpha. We all have worth. We all have voice, and we will all be heard." The cheering intensified. Rosemary found herself crying, tears streaming down her face as she watched the maintenance worker transform into the alpha he'd always been meant to be. Lucas appeared beside her, steady and solid. "We did it." "He did it," Rosemary corrected. "We just helped him remember who he was." "No," Lucas said, turning to face her. "You did it. You opened your door to 7 dying wolves. You risked everything to find the truth. You showed us all that Omega doesn't mean powerless. This revolution started with you, Rosemary Love." As pack members swarmed Reginald, pledging loyalty and celebrating the change in leadership, as Ricky Mason was led away to face justice for his crimes, as the invisible wolves of the Silver Pine Pack finally stepped into the light, Rosemary felt something shift inside her. She'd spent 6 years being invisible, being nothing, being Omega in a world that used it as a slur. But she'd learned the truth that Reginald had always known. Invisible didn't mean powerless. Sometimes, the ones no one sees coming are the ones who change everything. The storm had brought 7 frozen wolves to her door, but what it had really brought was revolution, redemption, and the revelation that strength comes in forms the powerful never recognize, until it's too late to stop it. Epilogue, 6 months later. Rosemary stood on the porch of her father's lodge. Her lodge now, officially returned to her by Alpha Reginald's first official decree, and watched the sunrise paint the mountains gold. The Silver Pine Pack had transformed in 6 months. Omega wolves now served on the council. Low-ranked betas held positions of authority. The invisible wolves had become the foundation of a new pack structure that valued ability over bloodline, character over rank. Helga and Tanya had been exiled for their complicity in Ricky Mason's crimes. Ricky himself was serving a life sentence in the Council of Alphas' maximum security facility, where he would never hurt anyone again. And Rosemary? She'd become something unexpected, Alpha Reginald's chief advisor. The Omega who'd started a revolution was now helping to build something better in its place. "Coffee?" Dave emerged from the lodge, 2 steaming mugs in hand. "Always." She accepted the mug with a smile. He'd stayed, along with Lucas and the others. The 7 warriors had found a new purpose, serving under an alpha they actually believed in, protecting a pack that finally deserved protection. "Lucas wants to know if you're coming to the council meeting this afternoon," Dave said. "We're discussing the new Omega Education Initiative." "Wouldn't miss it." Rosemary sipped her coffee, savoring the moment of peace. "Tell him I'll be there." As Dave headed back inside, Lucas appeared on the trail leading up to the lodge. He'd made this climb most mornings for the past 6 months, checking on her, sharing breakfast, slowly building something that felt like more than just survival partnership. "Beautiful morning," he observed, joining her on the porch. "It is," she agreed. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the world wake up. Then Lucas said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Rosemary's heart skipped. "What?" "I'm staying." He turned to face her. "Not just in the pack. Here, with you, if you'll have me." "Lucas, I know we started in crisis. I know everything's been chaos and revolution, but somewhere in the middle of all that, I fell in love with an Omega who refused to be invisible." His blue eyes held hers. "You showed me what real strength looks like, and I'd like to spend the rest of my life watching you change the world." Rosemary's throat tightened. "I'm still Omega. I'm still—" "Perfect," Lucas finished. "You're perfect. And if you need time to think about it, I understand, but I wanted you to know, I'm not going anywhere." She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The blizzard, the 7 frozen wolves, the revolution they'd started together, the pack they were rebuilding. And she thought about what her father had told her all those years ago, that the mountains tested everyone eventually, and survival wasn't about being the strongest. It was about being smart enough to know when to seek shelter and humble enough to accept help when it was offered. "Yes,"
she said simply. Yes. Yes, I'll have you. Yes, you can stay. Yes to all of it. She smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. But fair warning, being with me means being part of this revolution. It means fighting for omegas and low-ranked wolves.
It means challenging the powerful and protecting the vulnerable. I wouldn't want it any other way, Lucas said, pulling her close. As they stood together, watching the sunrise over the mountains they'd both nearly died on, Rosemary reflected on how much had changed since that night 7 frozen wolves had begged at her door. She'd been invisible then, powerless. Omega in every negative sense the word carried. But she'd learned that invisible just meant unseen. And sometimes being unseen was exactly what you needed to change everything. The Omega's revolution had begun with one open door on one frozen night. And it would continue with every overlooked wolf who decided that invisible didn't mean powerless, that Omega didn't mean worthless, that sometimes the smallest wolves carried the most important truths, and that truth, once seen, could never be hidden again. Dear viewers, as we come to the end of Rosemary's journey from invisible Omega to revolutionary force, I want to leave you with something to think about. How many Rosemarys exist in your own life? People you walk past every day without truly seeing? Voices you've learned to ignore because society told you they don't matter? Rosemary's story reminds us that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet girl who opens her door in a blizzard. Sometimes it's the maintenance worker who risks everything for truth. Sometimes it's the invisible ones who change the world because no one saw them coming. Here's my question for you. If 7 frozen wolves appeared at your door during a storm, knowing it would cost you everything, would you open it? Or would you choose safety over compassion? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments below. And if Rosemary's courage moved you, if her transformation from overlooked to unstoppable inspired something in you, please hit that like button. It helps stories like these reach others who need to hear that being underestimated isn't a weakness. It's a weapon. Thank you for being part of this journey. Until next time, remember, the ones no one notices are often the ones who change everything.